Good afternoon and welcome to members of the public, officers and members of the committee to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee, today September the 5th, 2024, and the time is 1 o'clock, or 3 minutes past. I'm District Councillor Charmaine Morgan, the Chair of Planning, and I'll be chairing this meeting today, and I will be ably assisted by Councillor Penny Milnes, my Vice Chair. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. For a fire drill, we aren't expecting a fire alarm to sound today, so if the alarm does go off, please leave the building by the nearest exit, which is through the main staircase or the back right staircase, which is either of those. The assembly point's on the green in front of the Margaret Thatcher statue. Can you please ensure that you've turned off your mobile phones or put them onto silent? Thank you. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed by the public on the South Kesteven website. Can you ensure that your microphones are turned off when you are not speaking? And please also ensure you do not place your mobile phones near a microphone to avoid any feedback. We have with us today Councillor Phil Dilks, who is a Cabinet Member for Planning. And we have our officers, the Assistant Director of Planning, Emma Whittaker, Development Manager, Phil Jordan, Principal Planning Officer, Adam Murray, Development Management Planner, Miranda Beavers, our Senior Planning Officer, Kevin Cartwright, and Senior Planning Officer, Venetia Ross-Gilmore. From Legal Services, we welcome today James Feltham. From Democratic Services, we have James Wellborn, and we have Joshua Mann, who is helping with minutes today. Public speakers and ward councillors, please be aware that you will have 3 minutes to speak and you will be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may then finish your sentence but not start another paragraph. And we will now read out the list of speakers and I'll hand over to Councillor Milnes to do this.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, application reference Boothby Wildland. The applicant, Ivan de Clee, who is the agent for Head of Natural Capital, Nattergal, if I've got that correct. Agenda item 5, application reference S240617, outline application for 80 dwellings. We have against a written statement by Mr. Lawrence Russell. Can you confirm we have received that?
So we haven't received that.
Sorry, we haven't received it, so that cannot therefore be read out. And we have the applicant, Mr. Robert Love, the agent for Bidwells. Agenda item 7, application reference S232033, conversion of public house, the Playhouse, Watergate. We have the applicant, Mr. Sarmad Aslam.
Sorry, Penny, I think we're still 6.
I apologise, I've missed out agenda item 6. Too keen to turn the page over. Application reference S232281, development of 8 semi-detached dwellings. We have no speakers. Agenda item 8, S240070, 9 3-bedroom houses, The Drift. We have no speakers.
Sorry, Penny, did you finish 7? Because I interrupted you.
Yes. Agenda item 9, application reference S240706, have District Ward Councillor, Councillor Phil Dilks. The Parish Council, again, did we receive? Councillor Shinkins Hope, A written statement will be read out by Democratic Services. Agenda item 10, S241191, removal of existing passenger lift at Stamford Arts Centre. No speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to disclosure. First of all, does anybody have any declarations of interest that they would like to share? No, that's fine, thank you. I have a statement which I would like to read. In relation to agenda item 6, the land at 28 Stonebridge Road, it is declared by the committee and its members that this land is owned by South Kesteven District Council. This declaration is made in the interests of transparency, and this application, along with all others considered in this meeting, will be determined solely on its planning merits against planning policy. I would also like to declare that I am a ward member for St Vincent's Ward, also relating to item 6, and I am approaching this application with an open mind. Thank you. We can now turn to the minutes of the meeting held on August the 8th, 2024. Would somebody like to propose these minutes, please? Councillor Wood, thank you. And would somebody like to second those minutes? Councillor Ellis, thank you. And if we can vote on those minutes, please. Do we have anybody against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are carried. We'll now move on to the order presentation of debate today. So the first item is agenda item 4, which is the Boothby Wildland, which is on page 27 of your agenda. The proposal is the creation of a biodiversity habitat bank to be secured for a period of 30 years at Extons Wood and Arkfield, which is east of Boothby Pagnell and Witherns, and Kirkhill, west of Beechfield. This is the first time we've had an application like this come to committee, so our officers will be doing a bit more explanation for our benefit when they speak. And I would now like to hand over to Officer Phil Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, members. So, as already introduced, the first item relates to a legal agreement to secure the creation of a biodiversity habitat bank to be secured for a period of 30 years. What the legal agreement would do is secure 4 separate parcels of land, 2 of which are located to the east of Boothby Pagnell, and the other 2 located to the west of Bitchfield, which I've got a plan to show where those parcels of land are. So the key issues we're considering, it's important to note this isn't a planning application that we're determining today. We're seeking authority for the council to enter into a legal agreement which would control the use of the land. So the principal question is, does that legal agreement secure the biodiversity net gain and the habitats for the period of 30 years? The monitoring and enforcement arrangements are quite key because that's the role the council has within the agreement, and included within the pack that was distributed with the main agenda is a draft Section 106 agreement, which has been agreed by both legal parties on either side, and the Habitat Management and Monitoring Plan, which is the more detailed document which essentially sets out how the land would be managed and monitored over that 30-year period. So the slide on the screen just sets out the wider site in context. So the red line actually relates to a wider parcel of land which is known as Boothby Wildland, and we're talking actually about 2 or 4 discrete parcels of land within that wider area. Essentially at the moment that wider red line is a 617 hectare parcel of agricultural land that's managed and farmed as a single unit, and the 4 parcels of land which would be subject to this agreement sit within that red line. There are some wider aspirations which may be of interest to members around the wider site over that period, but again it's important to note that they're not subject of the decision that we're making today. Where the applicant's speaking today, it may be useful if you want to understand sort of further detail about the wider long-term aspirations for the site, to direct questions in that way. So the 4, if I go back, to this slide, so the site, I don't know how well you can see it on the screen, but where my cursor is at the top, this is the Summerby Hill roundabout as you come out of Grantham past the barracks, and then if you were to go straight over that roundabout through Old Summerby as if you're heading towards Corby Glen, essentially this road, the B1176, goes through Boothby Pagnell and then passes close to Bitchfield, and the site essentially straddles farmland either side of that B1176. So as you look a bit closer here, so again this is zoomed in, that darker brown line, that's the B1176 between the 2 sites. You've got Boothby Pagnell to the north here. So one of the parcels of land is adjacent to some existing woodland, and what's proposed here is the planting of further trees to extend this woodland, and then there's 4 separate parcels of previously arable farmland which are to be used for meadowland and grassland to achieve those biodiversity net gains. So 2 of which at the north end of the site to the east of Boothby Pagnell, and then 2 to the south to the west of Bitchfield. So a bit of background where this has all come from, I guess. As members will be aware by now, biodiversity net gain is now a mandatory requirement, it's embedded in the Town and Country Planning Act by the Environment Act, which was brought in 2021, and the requirements that specifically relate to biodiversity net gain became mandatory in February of this year. In a nutshell, what that means is that all developments except for those which are exempt, some examples of exemptions are household development, changes to existing planning permissions, and other sort of very minor developments which don't effectively harm any habitats are exempt, but otherwise all developments must deliver 10% biodiversity net gain. What that means in practice is that those developments, when they submit their planning application, they have to complete a biodiversity metric which tells us what the baseline conditions on the site are, and they have to then set out how that 10% gain is going to be achieved. The legislation requires that in the first instance we consider biodiversity net gain on the site itself, so trying to ensure that where there's existing hedgerows they can either be supplemented, where there's existing habitat, they can be supplemented. But clearly it's not possible in all instances to achieve that biodiversity gain on the site. If you think about typically a greenfield site that's being developed solely for housing, for example, it can be very difficult to achieve that biodiversity on the site. So there are instances then that the legislation allows for a mixture of both on-site and off-site provision, and that off-site provision can take place either through additional land that the applicant has control of, or through the purchasing of biodiversity credits, which is essentially what this site that we're looking at today would allow developers to do. And it's a managed site where all the controls are in place to secure that biodiversity net gain. All the monitoring arrangements are in place with the local authority, and the developer then simply, what the metric or the biodiversity gain plan tells them is how many credits they need, and there's then a financial arrangement between the habitat provider and the developer to purchase those credits. The last resort where there isn't such a site available is that the developer is allowed to buy credits directly from the government in a similar type arrangement. So the proposal itself that we're looking at today, as I've already shown, Boothby Wildland itself is a wider 617 hectare farm, and we're talking about roughly 10% of that area, and that 64 hectares is split into those 4 separate parcels of land. The individual hectareage or size of those is shown on the screen. What's important to note is whilst this is a change from an arable farm use to grassland, meadowland, and in the case of Exton's Wood, the creation of a small area of woodland, the use of the land itself still sits within the Town and Country Planning Act definition of agriculture. So our view is that this is a continuation of the agricultural use on the site, albeit in a different form to the one that's currently existed. The biodiversity net gain itself is achieved through adherence to that habitat management and monitoring plan, which I say is in the agenda pack, and what that does is it secures that biodiversity gain for what it should say is a minimum period of 30 years. The applicants set out their aspiration for this to be a longer term, but at the moment the legal agreement ensures that it would be for that minimum period of 30 years, which is what the Environment Act requires. The council's role in this, SKDC as local planning authority, we have the monitoring and enforcement responsibilities, and those are tied up and secured through the Section 106 agreement. And an important point to note on that is that all the costs of that monitoring are secured by the Section 106 agreement. So that's done initially by way of an upfront payment of £35,000, but there's provisions within the agreement that if that money isn't sufficient over the 30-year period, there's clauses which allow us to ask for more to cover our reasonable costs over the planned period. And we've done it in that way just because this is very new territory, and it's just extremely hard to predict precisely what those costs are going to be at this point in time. So there's a mechanism there to ensure that that money doesn't run out, and equally, if it's too much money, there's the same provision to ensure that it gets paid back to the owners of Boothby Wildland. So evaluation of the key points here. I think my sort of overriding comment for members is that we should look at this as a positive scheme. This would ensure that the council can provide biodiversity net gain units, credits within the district. This is one of the front runners, not just in the county but across the country, and that's a really positive thing. But the reason for that is because biodiversity net gain is here and it's happening, and there will be instances where developers can't meet those requirements on site, and if we can't provide those units and credits within South Kesteven, the alternative is that they would get purchased out of the district, and we don't see those environmental benefits that we should be seeing secured locally. They would obviously be secured elsewhere. The benefits of the scheme, I think, are fairly clear in terms of the environmental and ecological benefits. Essentially, this is an environmental project which is taking a currently fairly intensively farmed part of land and using it for nature recovery purposes. There are some longer term potential for economic benefits, and again I want to ensure this is sort of separate to the key matter that we're looking at today, but the wider part of the site, the owners do have aspirations for tourist related activities and other rural diversification projects, and I think it's important to note that as and when those do happen, it's likely that could represent development in its own right, and at that point in time, should those other projects happen, it would necessitate the need for a planning application of which we would have control over in terms of decision making. And I've already talked about our role in terms of monitoring and enforcement. So what we're seeking here today is to delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning and Growth to enter into that Section 106 agreement with Boothby Wildland Limited, to allow the creation, management and maintenance of the biodiversity net gains for the purposes of biodiversity net gain obligations for the period of 30 years. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much. We do have a guest speaker for this item. Thank you. If Ivan de Clee, speaking on behalf of the applicant, would like to come forward, please. And I understand that you're head of natural capital. Is that correct? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I just want to declare, I don't know if I need to, that I'm ward councillor for this application, but although I'm aware of it and I have been to a presentation at Inglesby Church, I'm not biased or anything, so I thought I'd better declare that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And yes, to our speaker, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll be given a 30-second warning towards the end. So if you would like to indicate when you're ready. Lovely. Off we go. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for having me. My name is Ivan de Clee, and I'm the head of Natural Capital at Nattergal, the owner of Boothby Wildland. We are pioneering the role of private finance in nature restoration, and alongside Boothby, we're developing nature recovery projects across the country. I've been working in wildlife conservation and nature-friendly farming for over a decade, and I am extremely excited by the potential Boothby and BNG has to contribute to nature recovery in South Lincolnshire. We are in the midst of a twin global crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. Our birds, insects, wildflowers, soil health are all in catastrophic decline, and worsening weather creating local flooding and water pollution issues. Boothby Wildland will help address these challenges by sequestering carbon, bringing back nature and restoring our river systems to improve water quality and reduce flooding downstream, in particular in the flood-hit Lower Bitchfield. Owned by Nattergal since 2021, Boothby is the leading pilot project for the post-Brexit agri-environment scheme, ELMS. This exciting government-led initiative supports land managers in blending private and public funding to promote a nature-rich farming system. A key element of this is Biodiversity Net Gain, BNG, introduced in February 2024. Under BNG, new developments must show a net gain in biodiversity by first avoiding harm, then enhancing nature on-site, and finally, and only if needed, securing off-site biodiversity units. These off-site units, secured for 30 years under a Section 106 agreement, are currently unavailable in SKDC, meaning that any developer that needs units will have to buy them from outside the district. Establishing Boothby Wildland as a habitat bank would keep this investment local, in local nature recovery, local wildlife and local jobs, and enable crucial housing development within SKDC. Our habitat management plan, developed by our highly experienced team of ecologists and land management experts and approved by the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust and the Woodland Trust, will generate BNG units of the highest integrity and quality through creating woodlands and grasslands, whilst also supporting the production of sustainable organic beef and pork. Signing the Section 106 agreement today will position SKDC among England's leading councils in creating an off-site BNG habitat bank. Boothby is a nationally significant nature recovery project deeply rooted in the local community. We are proud to be part of South Kesteven and have already provided a threefold increase in rural employment on site, have a growing team of over 40 local volunteers, and have incredible community benefit plans for the site. Councillor Phil Gadd has already visited the project and met our team, amongst other councillors, and I am pleased to say is here to show his support today. And later this month, we're hosting the SKDC Sustainability Team.
That's the time. Thank
and
you.
we would love anyone else to come along. Yeah, we would love anyone else to come along and see the project in person.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions about it? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that. I just want, yeah, it seems like a good project to me. I just wondered, how can we be assured, there's a habitat management and monitoring plan, I see. How can we be assured that it will be maintained for 30 years? I know we talked about there's a fee for monitoring for SKDC to monitor it, but the company involved is a limited company, isn't it?
Yes, so as far as I understand, and Phil might have to help me with this, but the Section 106 agreement binds the land. So if we were to go bust or disappear, the next owner would be obliged to deliver against that habitat management plan as well. I mean, we have no intention of going bust. We want to be here for a long time. But the Section 106 agreement provides the provisions to ensure that that land stays in nature for the next 30 years.
I'll just follow up on that then. But there's no, unlike, say, roads, when Lincoln County Council adopt a road, there is a bond. There's no bond in place, is there, apart from the monitoring fee. There's no bond in place with SKDC to maintain it if things do go wrong in the future, is there?
No, there isn't a bond being placed at the moment. Most of the costs we have are in the early years of establishing the new grassland or the new woodlands, and we'll expect to spend that over the next 2 or 3 years. And then the maintenance of those habitats is really through grazing and a little bit of light deer management. So the ongoing costs won't be a huge burden for us as the managers or otherwise. It's really those upfront costs and then the ongoing costs of the team and the community engagement and all the other work we're doing.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Chair. I notice in 3.7 you say that the low-density regenerative farming in the biodiversity areas you'll be managing and that, but when I'm looking on wildlifetrust.org, there is no actual official definition of regenerative farming. Have you submitted your definition of what your regenerative farming will be? Because there have been obviously issues all over the countryside where that has not been what it was deemed.
Yes, so you're so right. I mean, regenerative farming has the broadest set of definitions, and it depends really which farmer you're speaking to as to how they understand it. The way that we understand it is using regenerative and restorative practices, i.e. restoring the soils, restoring biodiversity, restoring nature. And so whilst that would be our kind of broader definition, the actual commitments and the kind of legal obligations we have to comply with are all laid out in the Habitat Management Plan, the appendix to the S106.
Thank you. Councillor Harris-Bushnell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, which I fully support. That is very clear. What I'm very concerned about wildlife crossing, because it really pains me to see wildlife being knocked over by cars, especially the small mud deers, other animals that get knocked over by car and they die by the side. In the initial setup period, will there be any sort of a guided sort of a crossing for this animal, whatever the big major roads are?
That's a really good question. We don't. So, as part of the woodland creation plan, you'll see somewhere deep in the appendix in the habitat management plan we have badger gates that we need to put in so that the badgers can move freely within the woodland, and as Phil alluded to earlier, the wider site, we hope to create crossings and various different mechanisms for wildlife to travel freely across the site. But at this moment in time, with that main road coming through the site, it's not something we're able to do. Maybe long term, 30 years away, where we can imagine a new forest type landscape with cattle grids and animals wandering over the road, but that's a long way off. Yes, absolutely. We consider movement and connectivity as much as we possibly can in all things that we do. And we've joined the local farmer cluster, and whilst not all of our neighbours will be doing a scheme nearly as kind of all in as this, all of our neighbours are working towards a more nature-rich and nature-friendly farming landscape. And so whether it's corridors within the farm itself, within Boothby itself, or with working with our neighbours along the river, Glen, for example, to join up all of these different places is always in our thinking.
Would it be possible to tell us what actually will happen after the 30 years?
That's another good question. We, Nattergal, hope to put this land into nature in perpetuity, which is quite open-ended, but we want the land to be in nature for 100 plus years. So more than likely we'd aim to enter into another legal agreement, either to continue selling BNG units if that still exists in 30 years. If not, we want to bind the land under a covenant so that, again, if someone else were to take on the land, they would also be obliged to manage it, a little like what happens to woodlands at the moment.
Yes, so I understand that Emma would like to say something.
Thank you. All I was going to add was the reason for the 30 years is that's associated with the requirement for developers to ensure that they've got biodiversity net gain provided on their sites when they develop. So that's why the 30 years is important in this case, and it's just linked to that legislation. So that's just a standard approach.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Thank you for the chair. Thank you very much. Very interesting, and it all sounds lovely, and I'm sure it is. Just a couple of quick questions. The government intention is that the biodiversity actually is on the site that's being developed for the benefit of that site, possibly for the benefit of the residents nearby in some sort of way. And obviously this is an off-site. Do you have any sort of data or research into whether, the biodiversity itself benefits from the smaller plots that are likely to be on the development or the larger sites that you have there? And also, is there any proposal for human interaction by way of the general public? I'm just trying to weigh up the potential for the site is primarily going to be not sort of developed, obviously.
Yes, there is lots of data at the moment. So the on-site biodiversity net gain that is encouraged and incentivised through the metric calculations and through the mitigation hierarchy that we outlined, whilst it is a huge benefit to local residents and is incredibly important to follow that mitigation hierarchy, the actual gains for biodiversity, butterfly species, plant species, bird species, is better when it's delivered off-site, and there are lots of academic papers coming out of Oxford and Cambridge and others saying that whilst on-site is important for nature in its purest form, off-site is a very powerful way to deliver that at scale. And then from a community engagement point of view and public access, we, as part of this Landscape Recovery ELMS pilot, have been working with DEFRA to develop a site access plan, and we are going to put in 7.5 kilometres of new access routes, footpaths and bridleways, permissive ones for people to use across the whole site. And the 40 volunteers I referenced have all been feeding into that, and we've done various different meetings with Boothby Pagnell, with Bitchfield, with Inglesby, and we're trying to involve local people as much as we can in the design, both of the access routes and the use of the site. So no, that's very much a part of what we're trying to do. The people who live in the development that is potentially buying our units as a trade, there's nothing specific in there at the moment. It's a kind of simple commercial agreement. But we will be very interested and excited at the idea of actually communicating to whoever's development has gone ahead that what Boothby is delivering and how they can get out and actually enjoy the nature that's taking place.
Thank you. Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any chance in the future that the site could possibly be designated as special scientific? Yeah, I know in my parish in particular, we've got a meadow that is a designated meadow. I think it's called Tortoiseshell, near Tortoiseshell Wood, I think it is. There's a meadow in my parish, or in my patch, sorry. So just something that could happen in the future, maybe.
I think the answer to that is if I do a really good job, then maybe. We hope to deliver huge biodiversity benefits, and as part of that, we expect to see, we really hope and expect Boothby to become a very, very special place from a nature perspective. And so there is a chance that one day it might be designated as a triple SI or maybe a national nature reserve. At the moment, the government are quite keen not to impose themselves because they know it puts off land managers and landowners, the idea of having a designation, because the question of what happens after 30 years, most landowners and farmers are thinking maybe about the next generation, and they don't like the idea of a designation. For us, we don't mind the idea of a designation because we want that land in nature in perpetuity. So it could happen further down the line, but really got to just get on with the nature restoration now and do a good job from that perspective.
You wanted to say, you're right now. Thank you. Councillor Fellows.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. It is really exciting. I drive through there every time I come to council and drove through it, about an hour ago. And I think what you're suggesting is wonderful. And you may have said this, so I apologise, because I am naive in such matters. But how's the funding work if the units are sold on? I'm assuming there's a finite number of units. So if all the units are purchased by people through 106 agreements, there'll come a point at which they're all sold. Can you resell them over 10 years, or how do you see the finances going to keep the project in perpetuity?
That's another great question. And as was pointed out on the image of the map, this is only a part of the site. If we manage to sell all of these units, then we'd hope to bring more biodiversity net gain units to market, whether that's in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. But there are other ecosystem services we're hoping to sell as well, whether that's natural flood management to the Environment Agency through a river restoration, or carbon sequestration in our soils as they transition from one type of farming to another. So that's what we broadly call natural capital and selling ecosystem services. And what we hope is they will fund the next 20 years of nature restoration, 30 years. And then whilst we're doing that, the farm diversification that Phil referenced earlier, we would hope to then build businesses, whether that's on where the farm buildings are at the moment, whether that's an ecotourism, camping and glamping business or safaris, is to build other parts of kind of business and revenue into the site that will sustain it for the next 70 years following that. So the natural capital does the restoration, and that covers the first 30 years, and then farm diversification will carry us forward through time.
Thank you. Sorry, Emma would like to say something.
I think it's also important to remember that part of the monitoring, part of the role that we will have to do as the planning authority is that every time we get a planning application that needs biodiversity net gain, we need to then monitor the biodiversity net gain that comes with that application, and that might be on site, it might be off-site at facilities, at sites such as this, or it might be in the government credit scheme. So there is lots of monitoring that will go on to make sure that it can't be double bought or anything like that. So I think we've got those other safeguards in place, but they're really good questions because it's all new to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wood again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not negative about the scheme. I just want to reassure myself about future going forward on the scheme of that. And I think, I don't know whether it was you or Phil mentioned about Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust have been involved and improved it. But Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust have got a big involvement in Lincolnshire generally. Why have they got any other involvement in the scheme? And why haven't they sort of an agreement with them to take it over and maintain this in perpetuity? Is there any talk about, or can you explain that to me?
Yes, well, we're a private company, and we're trying to push and innovate around nature restoration and being a business rather than a government-supported or philanthropy-supported world, because we need a lot more money to be invested in nature if we have any chance of actually restoring it over the next decade or two. And so, whilst it would be great for Links Wildlife Trust to take on the management of it, they're under capacity and underfunded. And so, if we can pioneer a way to fund it properly through selling things like biodiversity net gain, and we can do it as a private business, then that's really exciting, and it will enable Links Wildlife Trust to run their own sites and hopefully grow in other ways. We work with them alongside the council team to really finesse this habitat management plan and the DEFRA and the Section 106 agreement. And over the county, Links Wildlife Trust are playing a sort of role to screen and look at habitat management plans and see if they're well thought through and well developed, which is the role they're really going to play across the county, I think.
Sarah Trotter.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as I say, it seems a long time ago since I came to Inglesby, but thank you for coming today. What is the realistic time frame before we start to see the real benefits of this? Am I aware you're still farming? It's still being farmed by another farmer at the moment. I think the farmer you bought it, the farming company you bought it off. Would you be able to just give an indication of timescales and when hopefully it's, obviously it's all on planning permission as well, but when you're hoping to kick in, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
The great thing about BNG is they let you start before you've signed it off legally. So we actually had a team of 20 volunteers out there today spreading wildflower seeds. Now, that doesn't mean we can sell the units because they need to be legally secured first, which is what today is about. But it does mean that we have begun the transition already to a more biodiverse landscape, which is really very exciting. And you'll see again in the habitat management plan, one of our fields, I think we started in 2022. You'll know from driving through it at the moment that to a farmer it looks like a mess because it's covered in willow herb and thistle and all of these agricultural weeds. That will start to ease as all of this open ground gets covered by scrub, grasslands and woodlands in the next year or two. But already, although they don't look very nice, those weeds are providing an amazing pollination services because they've just been full of butterflies and bees this summer. So it's happening already. The project where I used to work in West Sussex, that's 20 years old and has become a biodiversity hotspot of the southeast. So in the next 10, 15 years, you'll see a remarkable change. It really is quite quick.
Thank you. I have a question for you, if I may. I noticed in the management plan, the target plan, that the target is for moderate quality. Can you just explain why it's moderate and not good, or because it seems like that target is lower than the actual what does success look like? Thank you.
That's a really specific question because it's all to do with habitat classifications and the way the dephrometric works. So the way that the tool works ultimately is you have one type of habitat worth X, you have another type of habitat worth Y, and that habitat can be worth Y plus if you can improve condition through time. And there's a danger that's, and I say this from experience working on projects elsewhere in the country, that land managers and ecologists are being way too ambitious and not factoring in climate change and potential risks. So we've gone deliberately conservative by aiming for moderate in the hope that we overachieve and hit good. So we'll still be hoping to hit good every time. But I think to enter a legal agreement where you commit to good within 10 years with potential flooding risks or external risks that we can't mitigate for would be foolhardy. So we aim for moderate and no, legally commit to moderate and aim for good.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to now open up, see if we have any debate or any more questions of our officers. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you. And it literally has just occurred to me, but are our officers assured that, for instance, if a developer develops a site, that they aren't going to take an easy option to purchase a piece of land to offset their biodiversity when the actual biodiversity would be better on the site itself? And I can't imagine you wouldn't, but I just want to reassure myself that that actually is the case.
Emma Whitton.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this, and then if I've forgotten anything, Phil can chip in. I think it's a really good question. It's probably not quite a question for today. It's a question for the future applications, but as we're also getting our heads around absolutely everything, it's probably important that we give you some reassurance. The legislation and the emerging policies that we consulted on in the Regulation 18 plan are all on-site as a first priority. If you cannot do that, off-site, and then as a last resort, government credit. So it's a cascade. Therefore, if we've received a planning application, we would expect that the developer for that application would be demonstrating to us why they've chosen that option versus another. There will be some instances, I am hearing, that it's starting to take from the developable land, and therefore you may be looking at fewer houses on a site. That may seem attractive, but if we've got to build more houses, that's more land take. So, yeah. So I think just to answer your question directly, we will challenge that. We will look, because there will be that sort of sequencing process to go through on the applications, and certainly very much an application and challenge for and challenge for future applications. I don't know if I've missed anything you want to add, Phil, or is that...
No, I think, yeah, I mean, the simple answer is the legislation doesn't allow us to, as you put it, allow developers to take the easy option. But I suppose just to take Emma's point a step further, pre-BNG, if you think about it, where we were faced with instances where there was maybe ecological harm on site, but other positives to the development. Previously, we would have been faced with a scenario where we're weighing up the benefits of the development versus we say, well, there is some ecological harm, but we'll approve the scheme anyway, or not, as the case may be. So either the development wouldn't go ahead and we wouldn't get the benefits of the development, or the development would go ahead and we would have to take the ecological harm. And I think what this scheme allows is both of those scenarios still to happen, except that where there is harm or not gain on site, that there's a legitimate local means of compensating it. But it's certainly not a easy route for developers, because the legislation doesn't allow that.
Thank you. Just to let you know that we've finished our section now, so you are free to go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Bishnal Singh, you have a question.
Thank you. I'm just thinking, if legislation doesn't allow for that at the moment, will it be possible for us to, for SKDC wide, whatever planning application comes for that, we incorporate that in our policy, that we should really provide for biodiversity?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we had a draft policy in the emerging regulation, or the emerging plan to the Regulation 18 consultation, and that covers that very point. We can't put a policy in the existing plan. We've got policies in there about biodiversity and geodiversity and everything, but we can't put a specific biodiversity net gain policy into that plan because that plan's already adopted, but that's what we're looking to do in the emerging plan. So that was in there. We went out to consultation, due to go out to consultation on the Regulation 19, which is the pre-submission version in winter, so probably December, January, and we'll see where it goes thereafter. So, yes, we will be doing.
Thank you. So, yeah, just to clarify, thank you. Just to clarify that we are at the point where we are having debate and combined questions to the officers, if you want to do that. So, Councillor Trotter.
Thank you, Phil. Excuse if my naivety, but monitoring and enforcement. The only thing, I think it's a really good scheme, and it's really won over certainly the residents of Booby Pagnell. But when I initially went, there is a concern that the Corby Glen Bitchfield Road is quite a busy road, but the smaller roads behind Inglesby, there was a key worry about it exploding with in future when people are visiting and volunteers and it's really developing. Does that enforcement, does that work the same way as enforcement for housing, etc.? What I'm trying to say is, does that protect the build-up of that site? Because I think that's obviously their wish. It'll encourage schools and etc. But with that, obviously brings people, cars, etc. So I wondered if you could just elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the monitoring enforcement powers or obligations that are in the draft Section 106 agreement are very much about the council being able to be satisfied that the developer, in this case, commits to those biodiversity net gain and controls within the management plan. That's essentially what the enforcement and monitoring powers are, so that when those units are sold, we can be satisfied that that biodiversity net gain is indeed happening within those parcels of land and managed and secured for that 30-year period. I think some of the sort of wider questions that you've alluded to about the site are probably almost for another day, really. I think, I guess some of the potentially the tourist type activities that have been spoken about, which could happen off the back of this, would be likely to constitute development or a change of land use in their own right, and therefore at that point be subject to planning permission. Equally, if there's sort of operational development, as you've described it, buildings and things that happen in and around the site for the purposes of attracting people, tourism, again, that would be development and require an application for planning permission. So I think some of those things are probably something for another day, but they would certainly be something that would, we would have control and consideration over.
Thank you. David, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether this is the right time to ask this question or whether I should ask it sort of outside of the meeting, but is it not true that the sites that find it harder to achieve 10% biodiversity net gain are the ones that have already got high biodiversity? So it might be the case that the sites that we actually need to offset are the ones that are already got a high biodiversity anyway. So that instead of improving the poor sites, we might be just offsetting from what is already a good site.
I think,
do you want
sorry, I'm rather. I think it's true to say that if you've got a pre-existing high biodiversity value with the site, it's harder through developing the site. It depends what the form of development is, but it can be harder to then achieve it. But I guess that's a fundamental question about biodiversity net gain, and we're in that world, we're in that position, and the legislation's there, and this is about securing a site locally to compensate and meet those needs. What we can't do is change that fundamental legislation that exists.
Thank you. David, sorry David, you've just spoken. Councillor Wood.
Question for Phil, and please Phil, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it strikes me we've got a good scheme here. It seems like a great scheme setting it up. I'm quite happy with that. We seem to have a good procedure for monitoring, and they're giving us that fee to monitor it. But I'm just a little bit worried about enforcement, following on from enforcement. So we're going to monitor it, and in a few years' time, I think from reading it, we're going to monitor it every year, and then it goes on to 2 years. So if we find a problem that it's deteriorated, do we take enforcement? How will the enforcement work against, well, I suppose Boothby Wildlife Limited, and if they might not exist then? I'm just trying to get, where do we go enforce? Who do we take enforcement to, and how do we make sure that this is maintained?
Yes, I think it was sort of answered earlier that the agreement relates to the land use. So regardless of who the company is that's managing the land, the obligations of the agreement would relate to the land. But yeah, I mean, essentially this is a legal contract between the council and the owners of the land to manage and maintain the land in a certain way, and if that's breached, there's powers that exist within the agreement. It would essentially be through an injunction that the council would enforce the agreements.
Okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit too hung up on what happened at Long Bennington on Fen Lane when a lot of rubbish was dumped on and we couldn't find the owner, but that's okay, I accept what you say, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is following on a little bit from Councillor Wood and Councillor Trotter's thing about the enforcement. 30 years is a long time. Are you, as officers, confident that the powers that you've got of enforcement will cover us for that length of time? Have you put the enforcement, or have you put the regulations in place that would cover or everything that we can currently foresee that would happen in the next 30 years? Because as we know now in planning, quite often it comes up, well, there's nothing we can do now because this has changed and that's changed. That's what worries me about the period of 30 years and putting our powers of enforcement at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that at length through the negotiation on the detail of this agreement, and again, it's been referred to quite a bit. Most of in terms of these 4 parcels of land, most of the work to change it essentially from what it is now to this habitat-rich environment happens within the first 5 years, and the obligations on the owners is quite tough in the first 5 years. Essentially, they have to provide annual reports that from specialist ecologists which set out what they've done on the site and how it's meeting the obligations within the agreement. And then equally, the funding that's provided to the council allows us to take that report that they've done and send our own specialist out to look at the site, check the reports, and ensure that it's all being being kept to. And that same arrangement happens throughout the 30 years. It's just that the formal points of checking become more spread out, so it becomes I think it goes from a 5-year to then a 7-year, 10-year, 15-year type checking point. But certainly the agreement is structured in such a way that the obligations last for the full 30 years, and the costs to enable us to monitor that and enforce it are also set out by that upfront payment and the ability to ask for further funds if needed. Satisfied with it, yeah.
Thank you. I understand that Emma wanted to say something, and then I'll move on to David.
Thank you. I think the only thing I would add is we're actually required to do this as well, so we've got to do that enforcement and that monitoring, not only in respect of this obligation to make sure it's being complied with, but also those other developments where in the future we've perhaps agreed that they can use this as their biodiversity net gain, and that doesn't matter whether it's on a site, on the site of the development, or it's off-site and a site like this. So we are actually required to do that. That's something that the government, previous government brought in, and it's here, came in this year, and we'll just have to see, respond to any issues as we get them, but fingers crossed we're not going to be talking about enforcement, so thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any more. Oh, sorry, David. Let you go.
I was going to say, but we are in debate questions. I'm happy to propose.
I was about to ask if anybody would like to do that.
I'm happy to propose. Yeah, with the only thing I would say is that it's a shame. It's probably a symptom of being in Lincolnshire, actually, that a lot of the things that come forward, which we're supposedly whether it be renewable energy or carbon offsetting like this, or biodiversity net gain and stuff like that, it does appear to be taking up more and more decent agricultural growing land. So we're doing good by doing one thing, but there's obviously a sort of big downside to it as well by taking good farmland, which this is, out of production. The only thing I would say is that there's that much good, obviously farm growing, arable land around here. There's probably no other option, and I do see that the benefit of having it within district rather than outside the district. So with that reservation, I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
That's great. Thank you, David. Do we have a seconder? So you come on, we'll move to debate in the second panel. Sorry, Councillor Bishnassim, are you seconding?
I'm happy to second.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. We've now got a proposition before us, which is to support the recommendation, which is to authorise our Assistant Director of Planning to enter into a Section 106 agreement with Boothby Wildland Limited, to create, manage and maintain biodiversity net gain units for the purpose of satisfying biodiversity net gain obligations for developments for a period of 30 years. So that's what's before us. Did anybody want to say anything in the debate? I've got Councillor Ellis. Would you like to?
Thank you. I'd like to say that I have visited this site several months ago. It is extremely professionally run. They totally know what they're doing. I have absolutely no doubt that they'll make a great success of this, and I hope that everybody else will see that is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Burns, did you want to say something?
Yes, please. Just following on from what Councillor Bellamy said about agricultural land, I think this is grade 3. It would be useful if, Phil, you could just explain that this is all considered as agriculture in the Town and County Planning Act. Can you just confirm that, please?
Yeah, Josh, do you want to just load the screen again? I can put that up there. So, I mean, that's the definition of agriculture, which you can see is quite broad. And if you go particularly halfway down, the use of land for grazing land, meadow land, which essentially is 3 of the parcels, and woodlands that's ancillary to the wider agricultural use. And I think that's essentially what we're looking at. So whilst it won't be arable farming as has taken place on the site, our view is that it does sit within that wider agricultural definition.
Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do now then is go to a vote. So all those in favour of the proposition, please raise your hands. And that looks unanimous. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that's been approved. So I'd now like to move forward to application S240617, page 149 of our report, which is agenda item 5. So this is the outline planning application for up to 80 dwellings, including vehicular access, pedestrian and cycle links, public open space, landscaping, drainage and associated works in the land west of Peterborough, A15, Market Deeping. If I can hand over now to Miranda Beavers, our officer, to go through that.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair, good afternoon, Councillors. So this application is an outline planning application for up to 80 dwellings, including vehicular access, pedestrian and cycle links, public open space, landscaping, drainage and all associated works, with all matters reserved with the exception of access. The application site is identified here on the location plan. It is on the edge of Market Deeping, to the west of Peterborough Road and to the south of the A15. This is just for the benefit of those that didn't attend the site visit. This is just an aerial view, just so that you can understand a little bit more locationally where the application site is in relation to Market Deeping. The key considerations here are that the site comprises arable and scrub grasslands, and it is a site that includes a housing allocation in the South Kesteven local plan. The proposal incorporates advice from the design pad meetings as part of preliminary discussions that took place. The development proposes to deliver up to 80 dwellings. The dwellings will be delivered within the allocated area of the site, which I'll show you in a moment. And BNG metric has been provided, and the development will be subject to BNG being secured by condition on site. This is an extract from the local plan, just showing where the actual, in red is the allocation, and on the opposite side of Peterborough Road is an employment allocation. The site itself does also incorporate this area of land, I don't know if you can see my mouse, to the north as well within the actual application site. As part of the local plan policy, the applicants have provided an indicative master plan, which just illustrates here that the development for the housing will actually be within the housing allocation area, so that will be where all the built form is. And then it is proposed that the section closest to the A15 will be with where the BNG habitat is. And then this is an area of open space. At the moment, this layout is only indicative and won't form part of the permission if it's granted today. This is a proposed land use parameters plan. This will form part of the permission. So this it's indicative of where the actual built form will be. So the condition will be that the residential development will need to be in this section, and it's key coded to say where different parts of the uses should be. One of the key considerations is access. This is being considered at outline stage, so there would be one vehicular access point from Peterborough Road and several points of pedestrian access. The local highway authority have confirmed that the principle of up to 8 dwellings at the site is acceptable, subject to conditions. It is proposed to improve the footway and cycleway network as part of the proposal, and that is required by the Market Deeping Cycling and Walking Network Plan. The crossing point on Peterborough Road will be upgraded as part of the development. Provision of a crossing point into an island crossing would aid safe crossing of pedestrians and cycles. With the last slide in mind, this slide is just to illustrate where the access would actually be to the site. So on this picture here in the distance, you can just about see a white car. That's roughly where the vehicular access would be. And on this plan here, it's shown clearly. This is the access plan. And then that's just an aerial view, and you can see where the access would be about here to the application site. Okay. So the assessment is that most of the assessment is contained within the main committee report. The site is capable of accommodating up to 80 dwellings as illustrated by the master plan, and the access is acceptable. The officer's assessment is that the proposal is acceptable in principle, subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and to secure necessarily financial contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. If we can now have our speaker come forward. I believe we have one speaker, which is Mr. Robert Love, who is for the agent Bidwells. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. On behalf of the applicant and my client, the Rathbone Trust, I'm speaking in support of the application. I would first like to thank the Planning Case Officer for the full and robust planning committee that is before you. I'm pleased to note that the recommendation of the officer that planning permission is granted, subject to the planning conditions and the planning obligations. We agree with these and can rapidly progress towards completion of the Section 106 agreement. We ask that members support their officers by agreeing to their recommendation that planning permission be granted. The application is as a result of extensive pre-application and application discussions over the last 18 months with SKDC Planning, Design and Conservation Officers and the Lincolnshire County Council Highways, Drainage and Education Officers. This is a locally led development which is allocated in the Deepings Neighbourhood Plan and the South Kesteven Local Plan. We have worked extensively with Market Deeping Town Council and Deeping St James Parish Council, building a proactive working relationship leading up to the site's allocation and the planning application before you. We've also undertaken engagement with the local community, including public exhibition of plans. The proposal will help meet housing needs through the delivery of up to 80 dwellings, of which 30% will be affordable, comprising a mix of affordable tenures, including affordable rent, shared ownership and first homes. We have worked with officers and local stakeholders to ensure that a comprehensive master plan and design code has been brought forward for the site, which includes large provision of public open space, helping to facilitate the Deepings Green Walk initiative and bring forward children's play space and biodiversity net gain. The proposal will also deliver a new 3-metre wide footway cycleway through the site adjacent to Peterborough Road, as well as an island crossing to help facilitate safe pedestrian and cycle crossing of Peterborough Road, and further Section 106 contributions which will support the Deepings local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Provision of additional Section 106 contributions will contribute towards existing sports facilities in market deeping, existing healthcare and education provision,
30 seconds.
and a BNG monitoring fee. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to officers and to local town and parish councillors for working through matters to reach this positive recommendation. I respectfully request that members support their officers by agreeing to the recommendation that planning permission is granted subject to the planning conditions and the planning obligations.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of our speaker? Councillor Bird?
Thank you very much. Through the chair. It's actually a declaration that obviously this development is in Market Deeping, which is in my ward, and I am also a member of the Town Council and the Neighbourhood Plan Group, so have seen the consultation. So it would be up to yourselves to recommend whether I feel I can be objective on this one, but if you wish me to sort of sit out. So
if you're happy that you've got an open mind, then that's fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for declaring. Does anybody have any questions? In that case, I have one question. It sounds very positive, and certainly your plans have been well received, I note, by the Town Council. Can we just from bitter experience, it's an outline application. I'm aware that from the plans that we have got designated areas. Does this mean that they will not change? So the biodiversity net gain will stay, the open spaces will stay. However you perhaps change the layout of the housing area, that those are secure.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So the applicant has submitted a development framework plan, and that is that's an approved plan in the conditions, and that specifically sets out the area, the developable area, to the east of the site, and then the areas of open space to the west. So that will ensure that those areas are secured in terms of those locations. There'll also be biodiversity. There's a monitoring fee as well. We've put forward, I think it's upwards of about 45% BNG, which is well in excess of the 10% requirement, and also a plus 10% for hedgerow credits as well. So they'll be secured as part of the planning conditions and the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't believe we have any more questions, so if you are free to go, as they say. Thank you very much. And what we'll now do is move on to any questions or debate. Councillor Trotter.
Hi Miranda, you might be able to show it on the screen. I just picked up on 7.7.7. It says the site comprising 2 fields is currently partly agricultural use, and that it is quite well screened by hedging part of the way, autumn, winter. Is there any, I wasn't able to do the site visit, is there any drawing or photograph that would show that part of the site, and is it just next to the road as such, or is there housing that is close by?
Yeah, let me just have a look. I don't know if I've got a photograph. Do you mean from Peterborough Road, or do you mean from the A15?
It says from the northwestern side along the curve of the A1175, the site is well screened during summer and winter. However, it's a partial hedge line and would be more visible out of those seasons.
Yeah, that is correct. I don't actually think I have got a photograph of that side of the site on the presentation today, but it is just run alongside of the A15, and that is actually the part of the site as well that would it's up here. This is the part of the site where actually a lot of the landscaping would be retained anyway to provide the BNG. And the landscaping scheme will then form part of the reserve matters as well, so we'll be able to get more detail on that when the reserve matters application comes in.
It's all right, my colleagues just showed me where the road runs.
Does that answer your question? Are you...
Thank you. Did anybody else want to speak at this point? Councillor Bishnassi?
I just would like to clarifications, on it. So when I initially read the document, it actually raised that on page 155, paragraph 5.4.7, the crossing points there. There's two alternatives has been suggested here. I just wonder which one is going to be included or has been taken into considerations to make it provide a safe and very visible approach to it.
Okay, so the crossing point is to be required by a condition. So the condition requires the crossing point is provided along that part of Peterborough Road. So the actual exact detail of it hasn't been decided yet. It will be, I don't know if, can we put that drawing up again? Yes. So just where this arrow is here for the pedestrian crossing here, I don't know if you can see where my cursor is, that's roughly about where the crossing point will be, because then people that have cycled and use the cycle path, then they can cross and then continue the cycle path. Yeah. So I think the exact details of the crossing point are not in front of us today. Yes, I understand it is, yes. Yes, it is.
No. Just as a reminder, this is an outline application, so it's the overall principle and the access to the site that we're considering today. So just have confirmation that other details would be looked at later. Can we just clarify that, Emma, if that's possible, please? Yeah, thank you. So that could be looked at later, what you are referring to.
Madam Chairman, I don't know. I'm a bit concerned about it because that's a big major road. Because naturally people would like to go there because that has got a retail facility in there for people to shop. So people will cross. I just wonder if we can take at this stage a way of implementing a safe crossing for people naturally that would like to cross. I know from that side, okay, that's a small road to cross, but they're where the majority of the roads traffics are.
Thank you. Can our officers just clarify, because it is an important point, whether that should be looked at now or at the next stage?
Yeah, I think Adam is going to take this one.
So just to provide an answer for that one, councillors. So, as Councillor Morgan's mentioned, this is an outline application with access for approval. So we are considering the principle of development and effectively in doing so, what is required to support development on that site as a principle, regardless of layout, etc. Now, as Miranda's explained, we have consulted with the local highways authority. They have requested a condition in terms of a pedestrian footway, cycleway along either the frontage or within the site itself. And there is also a Section 106 contribution in there to upgrading the connectivity between the site and the town centre. They are satisfied that that is the connections required because they are simply seeking to encourage people to access and utilise the facilities within the town centre itself, and that is where the direction is. The actual details of that scheme will be secured through the Section 106 agreement and implemented by the County Council.
Thank you. Councillor Milnes, you were next, and then Councillor Fellows. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just to go back to what Councillor Trotter said, I'm not sure we discussed the boundary she was referring to. I just need it confirming. I think in paragraph 7.7.7, you're talking about the eastern boundary with Peterborough Road, where the hedgerow is, and we saw it on the site visit, where you spoke about it would be infilled and made good. Is that correct, Councillor Trotter? Am I talking about the right boundary?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
And I've actually had a look on Google Maps to give me a bit more, but thanks to David. But yeah, that's what I'm speaking of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about the other, the boundary with the A15, the dual carriageway section. But okay, that's fine. So the discussions that we had on site. So because the layout has not yet been agreed, so the layout will inform whether or not the hedge, how much of the hedge along there will be retained. Some of the hedge around where the actual pedestrian access is, where the pedestrian island is going to go, some of that hedge might not be able to be retained because it needs to go to make way for the access. But the intention of the developer is to retain as much of the hedge along there as possible, and if it isn't, then it will be replaced by landscaping, which those details will come in at the next stage.
Yes, thank you, because I think on site it was debated that this is an important gateway into Market Deeping. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really heartened by the process that the developers have gone through, and acknowledging the fact that it sits within the neighbourhood plan. The Town Council has been totally involved in it. The actual plan to me looks very sensible. I do know that part of South Kesteven very well, and unless Market Deeping councillors have got strong objections, I would tightly like to propose that we accept the proposal to accept this outline planning permission.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder?
Thank you. I was going to more or less say exactly what Councillor Paul Fellows has said. The neighbourhood plan has decided this is where future development wanted. That would have been consulted with the local residents. Everybody seems to be in agreement with the policy. Everybody's worked well together, so I wish them well.
Thank you. Councillor Pambert, please.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to raise a small item before we move on. In relation, on page 154, the LCC potential contribution, is that potentially, could that be reviewed in the light of changes that are currently being made at the secondary school? It sounds a sort of tricky thing, but I just wondered if we vote for the plan now, does that fix the the contribution at this point, or can that be reviewed at a subsequent point?
Is it the education contribution that you're on about there, Councillor Bird? So that is based on an assessment of the capacity in schools at the moment. So you'll appreciate the requirement here is to mitigate the impacts of the development itself. So the contribution there is fixed on a contribution per pupil calculated from this development. Now, because we don't have a fixed number of properties on this site, so we have a capacity of up to 80, but the actual final number will be fixed at reserve matters. The actual final figure, the actual total amount, would be fixed at that point. It will be in the Section 106 agreement just in terms of a formula for contributing of a calculation per property.
So that would be revisited?
The actual final contribution will be finalised with the reserve matters.
Yeah, thank you. And just a reminder, because we have a proposition now before us to approve this application, so that this is what we're now debating. Councillor Harrison, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Are we satisfied that the 106 contributions are going to be enough, that they will be able to achieve what they want? And the other one is that local residents have asked me to congratulate the developer on their engagement with the local community and the Deepings Green Walk, which Councillor Bird has done a lot of work on. It's refreshing to see that with the developers. But just a quick one on the policy?
Yeah, so we're satisfied as officers for those contributions, that they are sufficient, that they meet all of those SIL regulations, so that they are necessary, reasonably related to development, and would mitigate those impacts from the development appropriately.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. This does look like an extremely positive development and a natural fit, dare I say such a thing. Will provide 80 new homes. I would now like to go to the vote. So if I may ask all those in favour of this application, please raise your hands. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. This application has been approved. So we're now moving forward to application S232281, which is on page 181 of our agenda. And this is the proposal for a development of 8 new semi-detached residential dwellings in Stonebridge Road in Grantham. And as I mentioned earlier, I am a ward councillor for this area, and Councillor Ellis has got her hand raised as well.
Just to say that I'm also a ward councillor.
Thank you for that declaration. And I'm right that you will be keeping an open mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's great. So if we can now move forward, I understand that Venicia Ross Gilmore will be presenting this case to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is for a proposed development of 8 semi-detached residential dwellings at 28 Stonebridge Road in Grantham. The key issues for consideration were the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the impact on heritage assets, and the design. The site is within the conservation area, and there are a number of listed buildings in proximity. Site location plan. The site is to the south of Stonebridge Road. It was formerly occupied by residential dwelling houses that were related to the police use at Stonebridge House. To the east, the site is bordered by Sandown Road, and as I said, just now it's in the St Anne's conservation area. Stonebridge Road is one of the main routes into Grantham. The site is broadly rectangular. It has an existing access which is shared with Stonebridge House. And then there's Stonebridge House as a listed building, and there's also the barracks just opposite that you also have to consider. The frontage is partially open to Stonebridge Road at the moment, but there is a section of historic boundary wall on the eastern side of Sandown Road and a section remaining on Stonebridge Road. The site was cleared in 2020-21, but there are remaining mature trees on the south of the site and along the eastern boundary. A number of these trees have individual TPOs, and there is also a group tree preservation order in place. So the plan is proposed. The application seeks permission for 4 sets of semi-detached dwelling houses with associated access and parking. They're arranged in 4 different pairs, and they're 3 stories with single-storey extensions to the rear of the dwelling houses. There's a private road access to the frontage, as well as an area of open space adjacent to the public highway, and there will be on-plot vehicle parking for each of the houses. They also have a private garden amenity space to the rear. The applicant has engaged positively with the council, and there was a pre-application on the site, a design pad, and further discussions when the application was submitted. The initial houses that were on the site for the police houses vary of their time and have now been removed. The initial design for the site was a very contemporary scheme, as you can see here, and discussions in the design pad with Conservation Officer and Design Officer. There were many concerns raised about such a contemporary scheme with the sensitivities of the site, with the listed buildings and the conservation area itself. So the agent had redesigned the scheme for a much more traditional design, taking account for the local character and materials, and producing a scheme that we think would be more in keeping with the location. There is also the consideration of the key corner of Stonebridge Road and Sandon Road, and this is the response to that key corner. You can see there's double gable frontages, bay windows, and then the side is also broken up with a multiple carport. So the key consideration is that the site is a vacant brownfield site, and this offers an ideal infill development potential. It was previously residential. It's located centrally in Grantham and is well located for walking and cycling. There is no adverse impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties, and the proposal has incorporated advice from the design pad and been redesigned through the process to a much preferred amended scheme. It would deliver 8 semi-detached 4-bedroomed residential dwellings in this location. In terms of design and the design pad, there's been numerous amendments, included the amended scheme for more traditional design, with still some contemporary features such as carports and the open plan living areas. Improvements to materials fit into the local character and the character study of the area: red brick, limestone sills, sash windows, slate tile roofs, heritage windows in the roof space, and each pair are unique to the neighbouring pairs and take into account different houses in the local area and their design features. There is also an improved boundary treatment with the continuation of the boundary wall to Stonebridge Road and around Sandon Road. This will have pedestrian gateways in it, and this was one of the considerations that was key for the Conservation Officer. The design is mindful of the prominent location on the corner, and it also incorporates some sustainable building measures such as the EV chargers. To conclude, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We don't have any speakers on this application, so we will be moved straight into questions and debate. I just wanted to speak as a ward member and say that I have an issue with the comment that it's a brownfield site, because actually it's been unused for so long and it had very large substantial gardens in the previous housing, that it has actually got its own almost like ecosystem there now. However, this is a very welcome development for our town, and in particular for our ward in that area, and I'm really pleased with the changes that have been put forward as a result of the design workshop. And I understand, Councillor Harrison, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've seen the applicant, and I've just noticed the agent is Mr. Darren Timms, who's a very good friend of mine, so I'd like to excuse myself from this one, if that's possible.
I'm so sorry, I was being spoken to. Would you just like to repeat?
Yeah, I said I'd seen the applicant's name, but I haven't seen the agent's, and the agent is a good friend of mine. While I believe I can still be objective in the interests of everything, I'd like to exclude myself from this item.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Emma, you wanted to just point out something.
Thank you. It's just to update councillors and just advise that you've obviously got the recommendation in the main agenda, but it's also as an update on the update paper, the late items paper, with some comments from county and an additional condition in there as well. So the recommendation, as per the officers, will be as the combination of the two sets of recommendations. Thank you.
So James Welborn from Democratic Services, you had your hand raised.
Just a quick point, Chairman. Thanks to Councillor Harrison for making that declaration. I'd probably recommend, though, if he's not going to take part in the debate just because he's sat on the front row members, that he just leaves the chamber until we've concluded this item. Thanks, Chairman. I think he was probably going to do that anyway, but I just thought I'd...
Thank you. I don't have any hands raised. Sorry, I've just got one now. Sorry, Helen. Sarah, sorry. So I'll do Helen, Sarah first, then Helen. Thank you.
Venezia, thank you for all the work that's been involved. I do remember when the police houses were there, and they weren't the most attractive houses, and it's the actual bit of land, as we saw on the site visits, a bit of an eyesore. So I'm really I'm happy with this application, and it ticks lots of boxes. So very positive about this housing in Grantham on a site that won't upset anyone, I don't think, as far as I'm aware, but thank you. When it comes to proposal, I'm happy to propose it, but obviously we've got a bit more debate, I presume.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, and thank you for the display. When we was on the site visit, we did have concerns about the trees at the back, and the tree officer also had concerns about the trees that may have, as in 5.6, the trees at the rear have the potential to be overbearing to the new houses and its occupiers. And also on page 186, 5.8 again, the tree officer comments that the group of retrained TPO trees will dominate the gardens and cast shade onto the houses for the majority of the day. We have issues in Bourne with such things that the trees have got TPOs. People buy the houses and then say, oh, you know, they're overgrowing the garden, we haven't got any light, and that is a huge concern because they're big trees, they've got TPOs, you can only cut them back every 2 or 3 years, and you can only bring them back so much. I do have concerns about those houses with those trees at the back that will be possibly overgrowing the gardens and giving shade. Other than that, I'm quite happy for the site, and I think it's a good use and lovely designs, but I am concerned about the trees. Thank you.
I would like to come back on that, if I may, as a ward member. Yes, we have actually already had issues very similarly on a different site, unfortunately, at the Shirley Cross site in Grantham. I share that concern, but equally an important part of the character of the area, and I was involved heavily in getting the conservation area, I should declare that, in getting the conservation area set up, St Anne's Conservation Area, was the fact that the nature of the area is that it is very heavily, or did have, a significant number of trees, and they are an important part of the character of the area. So, depending on how much weight you give on that, the alternative would be that the houses move forward towards the street, but then that affects the parking arrangements. So we're kind of stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea on that. So my feeling would be that we do approve it as it is, and let's see, I have got, anyone who knows my house on Harrowby Road, a number of trees quite near my house, and they give welcome shade in the summer. So it all depends on who those residents are, and we would have our tree preservation. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but our tree officer would look at any applications to make alterations to the trees when it's appropriate or if necessary to do so. There's a flurry of hands here, but did you want to come back on that point, Helen? And then
I just think it's a wise thing to make people aware that we do have those concerns, and we have had issues, and we will have issues in the future where we have TPOs, back gardens that are covered in shade. People, it will be buyer beware, but people don't always think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Just really as a potentially just to clarify, the reason this application doesn't require a BNG assessment is because it was made prior to the February start date. Is that's the case?
Adam, did you want to?
Yeah, just to confirm that, Councillor Bird, yeah, so the BNG regulations for a minor site such as this came into effect from April of this year. This application was submitted prior to that date, so it's not captured by that statutory requirement.
Thank you. And Councillor Mills.
Thank you, yes. Just to refer back to Councillor Crawford's comments, we did note this at the site visit. It was discussed. We do have the late papers with an extra condition about protecting the tree roots. The trees aren't actually on the site, they're off-site. And yes, we all appreciate, and I think it was Emma's phrase, post-development tree resentment, which we all love that phrase.
I didn't make it up.
Yes, so the condition is added on, that's the extra condition there. I'm not sure we can do anything else legally to stop further resentment activity. As you're right, buyer beware probably.
Thank you. Did anybody else have their hands up? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, as you say, the trees are a real concern because they carry on growing and the roots go down and they spread. They might not be on the development, but I think could we have it as part of the condition of passing this, that the trees are really looked into and dealt with, even though it's out of the thing, they're going to be part of it because they're going to keep growing and go in. I mean, I know from personal experience that I had a problem with my own property and it altered the foundations of my drive. So I do think it is a concern, a major concern.
Thank you. I just appreciate Officer response to that.
So I think the trees in question are quite mature, so it's not as if they're small trees that are still getting significantly larger in that respect. They're not within the application site, so it would be difficult for us to control what happens to those trees off-site. What I can tell you is that through the building regulations, the foundations of the proposed properties would have to reflect the fact that you've got the trees in proximity. So they take all of that into account because if they're concerned about impacts on the dwelling, that might not affect the driveway, for example, but it would help protect the dwelling in terms of those foundations and those potential tree roots, if there's any still left to grow. But I'm not an expert on trees, and I definitely, just for the record, didn't make the post-development tree resentment phrase, but it is a nice phrase. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe earlier, Councillor Trotter, that you indicated that you would like to propose the application. Is that...
Yes, please, Madam Chairman, and I accept what my fellow colleagues say about the trees, but equally so it would be nice to have the wildlife that inhabited such trees close by. So, yeah, I'm happy to propose development.
Thank you, and I would like to second it, if that's okay with everyone. And on that basis, do we have anyone else wanting to speak? No? In that case, if we go to the vote. All in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. This application has been approved. Thank you. I understand that we're getting Councillor Harrison back. Okay, thank you everyone. What we're proposing is that we'll do the next application, which is S232033 on page 207 of the agenda, and then after that we'll have a break if everybody is happy with that. Thank you. So now moving forward on this application, excuse me. I understand Officer Kevin Cartwright will be speaking on this. Thank you, Kevin. If you would like to present this, which is the conversion of the playhouse in Grantham from its existing public house layout to 2 commercial units and 12 residential units on Watergate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the application as described, and I think the key issues for us to consider are the principle of the development, the impact on heritage assets, the application site, whilst not listed, is just within the conservation area.
Sorry, Councillor Bellamy and Trotter, can we thank
Say property not listed but is within the conservation area, impact on amenity and highway safety. So we've got 2 plans there of the application site, and the plan in the lower right corner is just showing the site again, but in the context of the green coloured conservation area. And then we've just got an aerial photograph there just showing the application site. Sort of directly next to there's a tyre factory, and then just further north of that is the Lidl superstore, just for reference. Then we've got the proposed site plan. So we've got the building sort of in the grey colour there. And then we've got the cycle and bin storage shown just to the rear of that, and then we've got some indicative parking shown how that the site could accommodate. I think it's 10 parking spaces. That's the existing elevations of the property. So from the frontage, we all recognise it as the Playhouse public house. And then behind that, there is that sizable sort of outrigger that projects perpendicular to the frontage. And that's got the existing floor plans, as I say, public house. And then I think it was the sort of food preparation area and the outrigger at the back. Then there was a sort of entertainment hall that it could be a sort of room that could be rented out, was at first floor. And we've got the proposed elevations, as I say, shop fronts fronting onto Watergate, so we've still got a presence of a town centre use at ground floor, and we've got flats above that. And as I say, then the conversion of the rear projection to residential accommodation, each property having its own sort of front door, more regular window openings, so we've got good light, accepting that it does actually face a building directly to the south. And then to the opposite elevation, the northern elevation, we've got a balcony that would look northwards towards the Lidl car park. And we've got a zoomed in version of the front elevation that would front onto Watergate, as I say, 2 shop fronts, timber shop fronts, and they're indicating sort of a Georgian style to try and pick up on the adjacent shop next door. So then we've got the proposed floor plans just showing the internals of the residential accommodation, and just some photos just for reference. So there we've got the property, sort of half blue, half white on the right there. We've got some photograph from the rear looking back towards that rear projection outrigger. And the photograph at the bottom there is just showing the relationship with the neighbouring property. I'd say quite tight. So not the best outlook from that elevation looking directly to the adjacent brick wall, but as I say, we have got the improved outlook on the northern elevation with the balconies. And that just shows the access drive back onto Union Street, and there's a couple of photographs at the bottom just showing the sort of visibility from that access on Union Street. So, principle of development, it's a conversion in a town centre location. Would bring a building back into use. Town centre use would be retained at the ground floor, so there'll still be a presence there and generating footfall. And there are other similar public house uses in close proximity to the site. Impact on heritage assets, say within the conservation area, the windows to the frontage, to the Watergate frontage, they would be repaired and retained. There would be the insertion of double glazed units, but they would be internal, so there wouldn't be any sort of change to the external of that property from the front. New and revised window locations on the rear outrigger element. We haven't got an awful lot of detail of those at the moment, but we are going to secure that through an appropriately worded condition. That would be condition 7 in the report. Again, accepting that these properties will have a limited outlook due to the neighbouring building, but we would sort of address that with the balconies that would be on the northern elevation. The proposed room sizes would all meet the nationally described space standards. Highway safety, no concerns from the local highway authority. Suitable access and parking within the site, as I say, utilises that existing access onto Union Street. We've also got developer contributions in relation to health and highways, and another condition in relation to securing details of the bin and cycle storage. Based on that, Chairman, it is requesting authorisation to the Assistant Director to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the Section 106 to secure those developer contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm just checking our speaker situation on this application. Thank you. Before I invite our next speaker to speak, I understand Councillor Harrison, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Chair. Again, just to notify you, this is in my ward, but no other links here at all, and I feel I can be objective on this.
Thank you very much for that. Would Mr Aslam like to come forward, please? You will have 3 minutes to speak and you'll be given a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Salman Aslam. I work at Grantham and District Hospital. Thank you for giving your time today and letting me speak. So from what I know, I'm not from Grantham. I moved here in 2018 and I've heard a lot of fun stories about the playhouse, whether it's birthday parties, football matches or even weddings. One of my nurse colleagues told me it was the place to go to in her teenage years for a night out in Grantham. When I saw the playhouse, I thought it was such a shame that such a historic and beautiful building had gone into such a despair. Today we are seeking to bring this historic building back to life by preserving its architectural heritage and also adding to much needed stock of the housing units in Grantham. So we think is the best use of the property because as it stands it's been closed for over a decade, and a lot of businesses have tried to come and try and take it on, and we still had a few discussions and we took the property on, but unfortunately no one was brave enough to take it on as a formal pub. And I think it would be a great shame to just let it go to further despair to the point where we might not be able to bring it back to life. And I think in terms of the 2 commercial units on the ground floor, the building as it stands is quite a substantial building and it's too expensive to run for one business. So converting it into 2 smaller commercial units will make it easier for the local businesses and young entrepreneurs to come and take on the building because they have lower costs, lower business rates, and it will just add, it will help the young people come into business. Converting the back of the property and the upper floors into residential units I think is the best use for the property. Firstly because it will revitalise the area, it will help bring up Watergate back to its former glory somehow, and also it will add to the housing stock. There'll be 12 affordable housing units. They're all quite small, so for young people to get onto the property ladder or for the young families to get onto the property ladder, I think they would be ideal. Thirdly, I think it is thank you. I think it's quite a sustainable development because we are not seeking to go into the woodlands or countryside land. We are making the best use of the building as it stands, and also preserving its architectural heritage I think is very important, and that's why we think this is the best use of the building as it is, and it would be a locally led development to preserve this building and bring it back to use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Wood, thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. Yeah, thank you for that. I think you've said the building's been in disrepair for the last 10 years or something like that, and you said you tried to market it as a public house, have you? Could you give us a bit more details of over what period you've tried to do that?
So we've not formally advertised it, but the previous owners, from what they told us, it was a brewery who owned the public house, and they tried several times, from what they told us, that they tried several times to run it as a pub, just before COVID and also just after COVID. They also tried to open it up as a nightclub, Pop World nightclub, if you are aware of this. And they said they couldn't run it, which is why they put it on the market. When we took it on, I have a colleague from the hospital who used to previously work in a pub, and they came round with their builders and their own partners, and they had a look at it, and they said it would be too much work to try and bring it back as a playhouse.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? No, I have a question for you, if I may. With regards to your new design and the refurbishment, can you just clarify if it's going to stay blue? Because a few people have commented on the colour, and I know it was quite controversial at the time.
We've had this debate quite a lot with my colleagues. We think the best way to preserve it would take the blue off and to make it more sort of fit in with the rest of the buildings on the street, which are more sort of natural brick, Georgian style kind of buildings.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
It's not a question, Chair, it's a point of information for you and for the gentleman there. That used to be a shop. It used to be an ironmonger's called Collard's, and you could go in there and buy nails and screws by the pound. You bought them by weight, not by packs. But its shop front was green then, just as a point of information.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bird.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Looking at the site, and obviously, and looking at the application number, clearly this was also an application prior to the requirement for BNG, and there appears to be no greenery at all anywhere in the whole site. Have you considered whether there is any prospect of introducing something green and pleasant in the area?
Yes, it's a very good question, and I think when it was used as a playhouse, the entire back of it was concreted. And what we intend to do is we keep the tarmac track that brings the vehicles onto the site and where the little car park is. But just next to the car park, you'll see another huge concrete slab there. We intend to have sort of a communal garden for the residents there, and it will be quite green.
Thank you for that. Has anybody else? Oh, Councillor Trotter.
Yeah, thank you. It's really refreshing that something in Grantham hopefully will be brought to life again. Is there any, as the owner, is there any thought about including the name, incorporating? I know it's not a planning issue, but it's a like. Can I put it that way?
So I think we will be keeping the name of the building as the playhouse. The sign is this on the outside, although it's not very original, it was added much later on. We would probably keep that just because a lot of people have suggested that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. If we have no other questions, Mr. Aslam? No, that's lovely. Thank you very much for your time. Councillor Harrison? We are now in discussion. If we have any questions of our officers as well, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As Ward Councillor for this, really welcome this. It's been an eyesore for a long time. It's right on the gateway into the town, from the north side of the town. As I say, I welcome it coming back to a shop. As I was growing up as a kid, it was an ironmonger's. I would rather not have the name Playhouse. I would rather have it go back to something like Collard's that it used to be way back then. Or even, as I've been trying to get something named after Malcolm Knapp. That would be nice. But I digress. But as as the ward councillor, to have this developed, provide accommodation, which is much needed in the town, as the developer said, especially for the young people that it'll be aimed at, and to have 2 shop units, which will bring what Watergate used to be way back when, before we demolished it for the car park, that it was the main shopping place going up into the town. So, yeah, I think it's a fantastic development.
Thank you. I appreciate it's early in the debate, but would I be right in assuming you might want to propose it further down the line? Okay. Councillor Fellows, you've got your hand.
Yeah, it's just a point of information for myself, and I'm certain that our regulations will insist on it, but my only concern would be the dwellings themselves, that there is enough insulation in between each apartment. I would hate it if all of a sudden you thought if the separation between each dwelling was literally just plaster and board. So, but I am naturally assuming that our planning will insist that it is done properly. And that being the case, I absolutely, completely support what colleagues are saying about this development.
Thank you. Emma, can you respond?
Not planning, but with the other hat on in terms of building control, that's part of the approved documents. So that's something that building control would pick up, and they'd need to deal with that both in terms of energy efficiency as well as sound insulation. So absolutely will be picked up at some point during the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Forgive me for interjecting, but it's relevant, I think, to raise the question I had of our officers at this point, and that was to do with fire regulations, because we seem to have on page 211, 5.5, Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue have actually stated there's an objection on the basis of inadequate access to firefighting appliances. And then on 552, we seem to have a potentially conflicting statement. It's not clear what their position is. And my slight concern now is that if we are proposing to put in a garden at the rear, which sounds lovely, could that impact on access to the fire brigade to the rear of the property? Has that been factored in?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the proposal in front of us doesn't have a garden in it, so it's just an hard-surfaced area that clearly has the ability to get a fire appliance to the back of the site. In any event, if that wasn't the case, building regs would require it to meet the required standards. So if the fire tender access couldn't get there, they'd require a sprinkler system or something like that integral to the building. Notwithstanding that, I've also asked building control to have a look at it as it sits at this moment in time, and they are comfortable that it does meet building regs, in so much that the outrigger out the back is, for all intents and purposes, like a row of terrace properties, each with individual doors. Then there's a normal stairwell in the middle, which would be fire protected, so there's a means of escape in that respect. The properties at the front, above the commercial units, are all accessed from the rear, and again there is a sort of protected stairwell, and the distance from that stairwell to the residential accommodation again meets building regulations. So there's no fear from my conversations with building regs that it couldn't meet their required standards in relation to fire safety.
Thank you very much. You can understand why I'm asking that question, looking at the height of it and its accommodation. Councillor Ellis, I believe you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to second Councillor Harrison's proposal, and again say I think it's a fantastic, it's going to be a fantastic thing for the town to have this lovely building refurbished and retained.
Thank you for that. Councillor Crawford.
Councillor Ellis beat me to it. I was going to second as well. To see this brought back to life would be amazing for the town. You know, it is in such a bad state of repair. I wish them all the success.
Councillor Mills.
Yes, just a very quick point, please. Just talking about the suggested communal garden, which sounds very nice. I can't see it in the plans. I don't know if it needs to be, but also, can you just confirm that it doesn't affect the parking arrangements?
Yeah, through your Chair, as I say, the proposal in front of us doesn't include a garden. It's just, it shows a parking area and it shows bin storage, cycle storage. That's how I've assessed it. That's how I've made my recommendation. if we're now wanting to amend the scheme to require a garden, then we're going to need to address that through an appropriately worded condition if we're seeking that. But as I say, I've assessed it very much on the basis of the submitted plans, which don't show a garden, to just leave the site as it is, provision for parking, provision for bin store, provision for cycle store.
In view of that response and the news that we've had today from our speaker regarding the garden, I believe some people believe that it would be a good move to put an area like that in. I do think a condition, however, is appropriate. Is this something that could be worded? Because I think it is important that even if it's providing an amenity for the residents, it doesn't have a negative impact. Is this something that the officers might want a small break to consider?
Through you, Chair. I don't think it would be anything above and beyond the normal sort of soft landscaping condition that we require, that we put on most applications, and obviously there would be the implementation condition that we need to go with that.
Would our proposer be happy to accept that as an amendment?
Chair,
I'm being told.
I really think this doesn't need that amendment, in all honesty. Knowing how that is set up out the back and what is needed for parking, I really think we would, if we force this on them, I think we would jeopardise its development. There is a large green area out of the rear of that to the left in front of the Grange that people could use that were there, from there, that quite often gets used. I think I personally don't want to propose it with that adjustment on, because I think we'll jeopardise the development as a whole.
Yes, Emma has a suggestion.
Thank you. So I think what Kevin was suggesting is that condition 4 is your standard before development is permitted is commenced. Details of hard and soft landscaping should be submitted to and approved in writing. We can absolutely add an informative if you wanted to suggest that we'd like the inclusion of a small communal garden if possible, or where possible. But there's also conditions on requiring details of the storage and refuse and cycle storage, and also requiring that the vehicle parking is provided as well, because we need to make sure that they are also done. So we can add the informative if you want. We don't have to add the informative, but there is scope within the existing conditions to allow that small garden area if it can be fitted into the plans, if that's, which I think would fit what you're saying, Councillor Harrison.
I question the need for it. I think we're putting. I mean, I would like my proposal to stand as it was, if possible. If somebody wants to amend my proposal, then that's up to them.
Okay, and may I just come back on this in debating on this point still? The only reason yes, thank you. I'm just speaking, Penny. Thank you. That's great. I'll go to Kevin in a second. Thank you. The applicant themselves raised the idea of having the gardens, so I don't think that I've an objection that in response to Councillor Bird's question. So I'll now move to.
Just through you, Chair. Just be aware, obviously, we are seeking a 10,000 contribution through highways, which would also improve, the townscape, landscaped areas within the site. So we are, there is a contribution to offset the impact of development in the wider area. So that might negate the need for something on site.
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Okay, thank you. So we've had a motion to approve in line with the officer's recommendation. That's been seconded, so we will need to vote on that because Councillor Harrison's not happy to accept an amendment, and that's perfectly right. You don't need to. When you're voting on that condition 4 allows the applicant to put in a green area if he wishes to. We're not forcing it on. He allows it to happen if he wishes to. Clearly, if as councillors you feel that it's absolutely necessary that it happens, then you might not wish to vote for the motion that's already on the table and think about an alternative that includes either seeking amended plans or a condition to require it to happen. But the condition as it stands does allow that to happen.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Vishal Singh.
Sorry, I agree with what the Assistant Director is saying, but however, the applicant would like to say if it is possible, he was putting his hand up, he could come back on it if that's possible.
We can't allow him to speak, unfortunately, but he's indicated through the speaking slot that he's happy to do the garden area. We obviously do need to make sure that there's sufficient car parking, refuse storage, etc. But that condition, as it currently stands, allows the applicant to choose to do that. So I have no problems. It's just whether or not, as a committee, you want to insist that something's in the plan, or you allow the applicant to do it and go through the conditions, and we can get what we need designed if it fits in with the proposals. Thank you.
Does that need to be noted? If the applicant wants to do it, he is free to do that, to make it, as long as it's not detracting from any other project.
We could add an informative. We can just note it through the minutes. It's either way. It's not really a particular issue, I don't think.
Yeah, thank you. So my understanding from what you've said, just to clarify, that we're now going to vote on the application as it stands. The conditions as they stand do allow room for the applicant to put some landscaping, and if they choose, and in effect, the conditions also would be with the approval of our officers, who would be considering any impacts on any other provision on site. Yes, so on that basis, we'll come back on it. So I would like to move to the vote, if I may, Councillor Bird, unless you had a...
No, all I was going to say is that I simply asked it more out of interest, and I'm not requiring, I'm not proposing that it is a condition. So just to clarify, that it was just for information, and I'm entirely happy that the applicant would do so if they felt they could. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in which case, if I'd like, we can go, hopefully you've all remembered what I said, and we can go to the vote now on this application. All in favour, please raise your hands.
Yeah, unanimous.
That's unanimous, thank you. That application has been approved, thank you. Yeah, so I'd just like to suggest we now have a break, say till past. Just give you time to grab a drink, go to the loo. Thank you. Thank you. Our meeting at 20 minutes to 4. So we're now moving on to the planning application, item 8 on the agenda, page 227. Reference S240070. This is a proposed residential development of 9 three-bedroomed houses with associated access off the drift in Harloxton. And I would like to now hand over to Venetia Ross-Gilmore again, who will be going through the details of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a proposed residential development of 9 three-bed houses with access, and it's land off the drift in Harlaxton. The key issues for consideration are the design quality and visual impact, the impact on neighbouring amenities and ecology and trees. That's the site location plan. The application site is to the west of the drift and on the northern edge of the village. It's currently undeveloped agricultural land, and there's an existing field access into the site off the drift. There's a line of mature trees and hedgerows screening the site from the street scene to the drift, and the trees are protected by a recent tree preservation order. To the north of the site, there's outlying residential houses. To the east and east of the drift, there's a more modern residential development, and to the south there is another newer residential development, with the main area of the village located to the south of the site. To the west of the site, there's open countryside. The site is broadly rectangular and as I said, it has an existing field access. Some site photographs. When we went to the site earlier this week, it was quite overgrown, but when I visited the site previously, I think you can get a better picture of the site from these. So that's facing north, northwest and west. Submitted landscape plan. As you can see, the trees retained on the eastern boundary. This is the development proposal. It seeks full planning permission for the erection of 9 detached residential dwellings with the associated access. They're all detached 1.5-storey dwellings with 3 bedrooms and arranged on a private driveway. The private driveway uses the existing field access, but this would be upgraded to be suitable to use for residential development. The dwellings all have private gardens to the rear and parking provision for 2 vehicles to the front, along with garden space. This is the street scene to the drift. This is actually the rear of the properties. As you can see, it's a very active frontage. This was something that was picked up on in the pre-application and the design pad, and the submitted application has noted the comments that were made by officers and has endeavoured to make an active frontage to the drift and onto the private roadway. So the key considerations for this site is this offers an infill development potential within the village. The site is currently not well maintained. When we visited it, it was very overgrown and could be considered a bad neighbour. There were comments from the public about dilapidated sheds and caravan. So it is an eyesore in the village. The reuse of the site for housing would improve the street scene to the drift, and it would also improve the outlook for the residents on Strood Close and Violet Close. It's a sustainable location. It's well located with a public footway connection. You're within walking and cycling distance of all the village amenities, such as the primary school, village hall, post office and the pub. There'd been no adverse impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties. There were no objections from statutory consultees. As I said before, the proposals incorporated advice from the design pad, the design officer, and the development would deliver 9 detached 3-bedroom residential dwellings in this village. In terms of design, it's been through a thorough design pad, and there have been amendments to the design. So in the life of this application, the position of the housing was amended, and they were moved further away from the line of the TPO trees, following comments from the tree officer. There's the 2 facing elevations to the houses, so they're also facing the drift. There's high quality traditional designs, including stone detailed brickwork, stone lintels and sills, taking account of the local area and materials. There's an extensive hard and soft landscaping proposals with this including public open space to the south of the site as you come in, and creating another buffer between the existing residential dwellings on Strood Close and Violet Close and this site. There's attention to detail on the boundary treatments, such as this post and rail fencing with native hedgerow, and this is going to be used fronting the drift, so to further create the illusion of active frontage. There's also the use of a non-standard turning head within development, which creates an attractive square, and the trees are planted within this square arrangement. The properties themselves have taken into account all the officer comments about sustainable building. They will have EV chargers, solar panels, air source heat pumps, and mechanical ventilation with heat recovery systems, providing a much more efficient use of energy, such as reducing heat and cooling demands. There's also a proposed nature area with mitigation for species, new hedgerows and bird and bat boxes, although this site actually predates the BNG requirements for an application. Oops. So the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. It's our understanding we have no speakers for this application, so in that case we'll move straight forward into debate and any questions that you might have for our officer. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Bird.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just in case I missed it, could you clarify whether this site is allocated in the local plan for residential development?
So it's not currently allocated within our adopted local plan. It is identified as a potential allocation in the draft local plan, so the recent consultation on the local plan review does include this site as a potential draft allocation. Now, members will appreciate you can give that very limited weight at this stage because it is still only a draft stage. So at this point in time, it's a windfall development as opposed to any allocation within our adopted local plan policy. So that's why it's assessed against SP3 in this case. Not within the local plan, it's not allocated at this stage.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? No? In that case, from the looks of it, this is a well thought out scheme, and I can't see any reason to refuse this application. It seems to be pretty well received, and I would like to recommend approval of this application. If I could have a seconder. Councillor Harris-Singh.
Very happy to second this proposal because it lists quite a lot of the things that we do continuously ask here, and it's implemented here in this application. Yeah, I fully support it.
Thank you. I think my only further comment is that I think it's another example of how the design pad seems to be working so well. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. If I can now go to the vote in that case, all those in favour, please raise your hands.
Yep, unanimous.
That's unanimous. That application, sorry, Councillor Trotter, is that up? So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you all for that. So we're now moving on to agenda item 9, which is application S240706, which is on page 257. So this proposal is for section 73 application to vary condition 2 of approved plans of S201862, amendment to plot 3 house type. This is in Osier Farm in Deep in St James, and I will now hand over to our officer, Miranda Beavers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon again, councillors. So this application is at Osier Farm at Eastgate in Deep in St James, and the key issues raised are impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact upon heritage assets, and the heritage asset in this case is Osier Farmhouse. So under application reference S201862, permission was granted in 2020 for the demolition of the existing modern farm buildings that were on the site, alterations and extension to the traditional farm buildings that remained to form 2 dwellings, and for the erection of 5 new dwellings and associated garages. So the Osier Farmhouse is this building here, which is a thatched roof property, and the barn that has been retained on site is this one here, and that's being converted into a dwelling. This large building that's in the centre of the site here is no longer there. That has been removed. So for the purposes of this application, we're just looking at the changes to plot number 3. So plot number 3 is this one here, so it's to the rear of the site, set away from the thatched cottage that is Osier farmhouse. So for identification, it's at the back of the site. These are the proposed elevations for the new building. It's a detached house, and it is proposed to have a 3rd storey in the roof. The window is in the gable of the property, and that will face over onto the fields, so you wouldn't necessarily see that from Eastgate. The key considerations are the principle of the development has already been established through the planning permission in 2020, and the permission is extant, so building works has started on site. A revised design for plot number 4 has already been approved earlier this year, and the height of that dwelling has been approved at 8.2 metres. A revised design for plot 2 has already been approved at the end of 2023, and the height of that dwelling would be 8 metres. The impact of the revised design on the character and appearance of the area and the introduction of the 3rd storey is the key consideration, and the impact upon the nearby heritage assets to the proximity to Osier farmhouse. To help to illustrate that, the applicants have provided a street view section. This is actually available in the late items paper, as it became available earlier on this week. This just shows for reference across the street view from 160 Eastgate across and through the site. This is plot number 4, which is the building that's been approved already at 8.2 metres, and this is the application site at 8.75 metres. This is a photograph taken from the site entrance. The photograph was taken, I think, yesterday. So this just shows, this is plot 4 that is under construction, it's up to the roof trusses. That's the building that's 8.2 metres high, and the plot 3 is proposed to be built straight to the rear of it. This here is Osier farmhouse, but that's sort of the more modern part of the house. The thatched section of it is just out of shot. This is the photograph just taken from Eastgate. This is Osier farmhouse here, and the development will sit behind. Key considerations: the Conservation Officer has assessed the proposal in the context of the Grade 2 Osier farmhouse and considers that, and these are his words, in the context of the surrounding plots, the increase in height will result in a neutral impact upon the significance of the listed building. The proposal, as amended, will create a stepped roof line towards the rear of the site away from the listed building. The location of plot number 3 at the rear of the site overlooking the field would mean that the slightly taller building would have no adverse impact on the street scene, and no overlooking or loss of privacy as a result of the amended design is taking place. So finally, the officer, my recommendations set out in the main committee report. The principle of the development has already been established. The revised design of plot 3 would have no significant or unacceptable material impacts, including the impact on the character and appearance of the area or the significance of the heritage assets, and it is recommended to authorise to approve the application subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We do have a speaker on this application. Councillor Phil Dilts, would you like to come forward? Councillor Dilts is the ward member. and you'll have 3 minutes with a 30-second reminder. If you would just like to indicate when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you. Before we start the clock, thank you, Madam Chairman. Before we start the clock, in the interest of transparency, and you've already said it, may I state that I address members today, not in my capacity as Cabinet Member for Planning, but for the first time in more than a dozen years as District Councillor. I speak from this platform as the ward member, one of 3 ward members for Deeping St James, and I'm pleased to say the other 2 members support what I'm saying. If you want to start the clock. You'll see there's already been 3 previous applications over recent months to amend already approved plans to build 5 houses on a historic farmyard. This application being the 4th such application to amend and overall increase the scale of what's already been approved. I welcome the strong objections raised to this application by our Conservation Officer in May. They're not in your report before you, but they're still online, and they clearly state, I quote, "This proposal will result in a change of setting to the listed building and will impact the listed building. The proposed building is much larger in scale and moves away from the previously approved cottage style of dwelling, which is more in keeping with the listed farmhouse. The roof height has increased from approximately 7 metres to 9 metres. The Conservation Officer went on to state, Plot 3 will still be intervisible with the listed building, and the increase in height dwarfs the listed building at the front of the development. Other plots within the development have a lower roof height to reduce their impact on the existing Grade 2 listed building." End quote. On the 3rd of July, revisions to the Section 73 application were published, including lowering the proposed ridgeline by less than 3%, from 9 metres to 8.7 metres, or it was 1.7 metres higher than the already approved 7-metre ridgeline, which is I would just point out 1.7 metres being the average height of members present. During this, despite this, the Conservation Officer withdrew objections. I appreciate that the listed cottage would be partially shielded from the impact of Plot 3 by the already approved 8.2 metre roof line of Plot 4. However, I asked the committee to consider how reducing a 9-metre ridgeline by less than the length of this ruler, this one, can change, or this piece of paper, less than that, can actually change Plot 3 from being, in the Conservation Officer's words, dwarfing the listed cottage as stated in May, to being, quote, now more in keeping with the Grade 2 listed cottage, which it will and will not dominate it visually due to the reduction in height. 8.7 metres appears to be higher than others in the locality, and I would point out the whole site is next door to a dormer bungalow. I thank you, members of the committee, for carefully considering this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Lady Chairman. Question to Councillor Dilks. Could you tell us what the original height was again and what the proposed heights are of the current application, please, Phil? Thanks.
My understanding, thank you, Councillor Bellamy, my understanding is that it was in the order of 7 metres originally, and that through amendments which have upscaled the development, certainly in this one and at least one of the previous ones, I believe it went up to 9, and then as a result of the Conservation Officer's objections, it got reduced to 8.75. In other words, 0.25 of a metre, about less than the...
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. I just wondered, it's strange because I'm reading the Conservation Officer's report. He's now saying it's got a neutral impact, but there seems to be a lot of difference from what you said. His original report was saying there wasn't impact. Now he's actually saying this report is a neutral impact, although there's a big height difference, isn't there? Do you know?
I don't think there is a big height difference, but you are right, and that's what I'm questioning.
Maybe that's the question I should ask officers.
You're certainly welcome to do that after, certainly. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, you're obviously closer to this one than I am. Was the original approval for a two-storey property, and at what point did it become an application for a three-storey? And are the other properties on that site three floors?
My understanding is that the original application was not for a three-storey, that it was for and that all five were two-storey. That is my understanding, and that it's become three-storey as a result of this application.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? It seems that some of the last two questions it might be appropriate for officers to respond to. If Councillor Dilshaw, you're happy with that. If I could just ask that we hold them for after Councillor Dilt's session's finished. Do we have any more questions for Councillor Dilts? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks, has the neighbours objected to the height of these buildings and come to you yourself? Have you had many complaints?
Not. I understand not, but the parish council, I believe, has sent a statement in, and the parish council do object. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma Whittaker would like to comment, please.
Thank you. If I just draw your attention to page 261 in the agendas, you'll see that we've advertised it as we're required to do so, and we've not had any letters of representation received. You'll be able to see the comments, though, from the consultees on the preceding page and on that page as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody no more questions then for Councillor Dill? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members.
We had a couple of questions that were raised, which we felt perhaps might be more appropriate for officers to answer. Would you be able to respond to the comments that were made?
Yeah, would you be able to repeat what the questions were, please?
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Wood first and then Councillor Bird. It's the difference in the comment by the conservation officer between one height and another when there seem to be relatively...
Yeah, that was my question, why because I'm confused as to why Councillor Dill said the conservation officer he raised queries about it and was concerned about it. Now he says the effect's neutral. So
yeah,
why is that change of view from the conservation officer, really?
I can answer that. So the original application that came into us, I think when it was submitted, in May, June, when the application was submitted, the height of the proposed dwelling was proposed at 9.2 metres. But in addition to that, there was also a large feature window on the front elevation, which the conservation officer had a particular objection to as well. So we wrote to the agents and said that that would be refused. We'd recommend that for refusal. It wasn't acceptable. They asked if they could amend the application, so we accepted amendments. And the amendments came in. The proposed height was reduced to 8.75 metres. And the window that we had an objection to was also removed from the scheme. The application was then assessed in the context of the two dwellings that were now flanking it on either side. Rather than looking at what was approved originally, we looked at what's actually been approved, plots 4 and 2 that are either side of it. Also to point out that when we dealt with those applications, the parish council didn't object to either of the other two applications for the 8.2 metre high or the 8 metre high dwelling. And I think the other question was there any three-storey dwellings originally on the scheme, and there wasn't. But this application, there will be accommodation in the roof space, sort of like a loft conversion. But to all intents and purposes, when you view it from Eastgate, it's not as if it's got dormers in the roof or anything. So, and there is a property on exactly the opposite side of Eastgate, 160, that does have has got a loft conversion sort of quite similar with sort of circular feature window in the roof.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bird.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Miranda. The property on the other side of Eastgate, which is sort of taken as an example that of the roof space and the height, that one I believe is 8.1, and it's already, I think, the tallest building in the locality there. So I am concerned that it's quite possible to get the three-storey within an 8.1 or 8.2 metre height. So I know the design has there's obviously some leeway on the roof space, but to increase it by that other amount seems excessive, and it feels like sort of extension by creep, by sort of keep putting in a bit more, and that doesn't feel like a great practice in the best of times, but given its location and its proximity within that area, it is out, as I know the area, it's not my ward, but I feel it would be out of keeping with that extra height. I'm sure they could get the same type of property to live in the same floor space by an 8.1, 8.2 to be in keeping with the other very high buildings that are actually surrounding it. I don't know if that's been considered, whether they could reconsider the design to keep it at that height so that it is no higher, therefore, than the other adjacent buildings.
I think I've just assessed the application that's been put in front of me. So we've assessed it, and the Conservation Officer has looked at it in terms of the distance of that roof to the Osier farmhouse and the impact it might have on that significance. The one that is on the opposite side of Eastgate, which is 160, is actually far closer to Osier farmhouse than that one will be. That one's set further back. I really do believe that once that building is in situ at 8.75 metres, I don't think you'll necessarily really notice the difference in height. But that's my recommendation.
Councillor Vishnu Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. Would it be possible for you to tell me what was the original applications when for plot 3 came? What was the actual height proposed in the original applications? Please.
I believe it's in my. I think it's in my report, but it was 7 point something. I think the increase in height from the original design to this one is 1.75 metres, I believe, difference. But I have to assess it in the context of the other ones that have been approved, the one directly in front of it and the one at the other side. And they've all increased in height as well.
So is that compensation for the rise in the height? Is it compensation for the ground level? Is there much difference between plot 2 and plot 5 in terms of the ground sloping?
No, I think it just purely comes down to the design. I think the site level is fairly level.
Right. Okay. So
Thank you. I have a query. I appreciate that we've got two properties not too much shorter already approved, but how do they relate to the farmhouse roof line? I found that difficult to work out from the plan that was provided because the angle's completely different. It's almost like we're looking at it the wrong way. So I don't know if it's possible to go back to the photograph you had of the farmhouse and indicate where the roof lines would be of those two that were approved and where this would fall, this house.
this is the street view section that they've provided. You almost have to flip that drawing over to be able to visualise it in the street scene. So this property here is number 160, which is on the opposite side of the road, and then you look down the site, and so that would be the order of the height differences. So this is the one that's 8.2 metres, and this is 8.75. So if I try and show you this is plot 4. So the section that you're seeing is directly from this side of the road down. I don't know if I'm explaining it ever so well, but so this is 160. This is the one that is 8.1 metres, and this is Osier Farmhouse, and then the plot number 3 will be right at the back here. I think the people that visited the site were able to sort of see that relationship. So that's, I think the block plan helps a bit.
It's sort of to clarify, looking at the photograph, it looks like the house, which is currently one of the tallest ones on the other side of the road to the farmhouse, is actually not taller than it, but it's comparable.
It's very comparable, yeah.
But the new houses are actually taller than the farmhouse, and if you're looking at the farmhouse, would be behind it, therefore affecting the view of the farmhouse that characterises the heritage asset. So I think there could be an issue there, in my opinion. Can you just clarify, if we look at the farmhouse photograph again, exactly what the height would be in relation to that heritage building?
Sorry, it's been assessed in the context of the 2 dwellings that have already been approved. So you will be able to see them first. They will be visible before you see plot 3. I don't know if Adam wants to add anything.
Yeah, so if you look at that one, Councillor, so the building to the front of you is obviously a farmhouse, the more modern sort of element of it. The building that you can see directly in front of you down down the estate road there is plot 4, which is approved height as 8.2 metres. The plot that you're considering today, behind it, plot 3, would be 8.7 metres. So what you'd have would be a 500 millimetres slightly higher roof line when you're looking down that viewpoint. So I think, as Miranda said, our point of view, when you consider it in the context of that view effectively, you will see almost a slight step increase in the height. We don't believe that that slight increase in height is particularly harmful in the context of things, but ultimately that is the question that's been asked of councillors today. You may take a different view, but our view is that slight increase would not be harmful when you consider it in the context of what has been approved.
Yes, I think it would be interesting to explore that, because this particular plot that we're discussing is some distance away from the farmhouse when you look on site, and it's actually going to be behind one that's currently being built, as you can see there. The house opposite, number 160, is in a relatively close relationship, but this isn't, and it'd be interesting, that distance, because it goes quite a long way back, and you've got intervening buildings as well, and it is right at the back of the site. So if you take a perspective view, you know, it recedes with distance. So when we were on site, you could sort of make that out, that actually it's not right in front of the farmhouse, it's not right there. So I think on the site visit, it was apparent that actually whilst it is slightly higher, isn't it? It's the context and the perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, I have to agree with Councillor Milnes. And when you stand there and you look at the distance, and it is some way back, plot that one that's already been built, the other one's going to be even further back. You will not notice the difference in height when you're stood there, and that one is going to be further away than the one across the road. So I don't see an issue with it personally.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Bellamy, did you have your hand up there?
The only comment I would make, I didn't, but I'll make a comment anyway. So the only thing I would say is that looking from that photograph, the road and the gardens do appear to slope away slightly, so the height's not as obvious. But I do take the point, looking down the road where the development's taking place, it does seem as if the separation distances are quite a lot. So, and it's behind plot 4 that Adam's, is it plot 4, Adam, that you pointed out? Yeah.
Thank you. I think Emma would like to talk to you.
Thank you. So on the additional papers, you've got some additional plans that have come in. They're a little bit small, so apologies for that. But we've shown them on the screen. So one is the site location plan, and then we've put the cross sections there. Unfortunately, the natural way, for me anyway, of looking at the site plan is that you're looking at it left to right, with the listed building on the left, plot 4 on the very right, and then the section, which is what Miranda was saying, flip it round, they've gone other way round. So you've got to imagine it literally the other way round. What you can't see on there, because it's a little bit small, is it's been annotated with some distances. So what I can tell you is that from Osier Farm building itself, and there is a garage then behind the farmhouse itself, but the actual farmhouse, there is a distance of 76.195 metres to the closest point of the proposed house that we're talking about. Obviously there's a garage as well, and that garage is recessed, so it's the house itself, not the garage. And the distance to plot 4 that's being built is nearly 53 metres, so there is a fair distance between those plots. So hopefully that just helps and puts that into context. Thank you.
I'm just giving you all a chance to look at the plan quickly. Councillor Bushnell Singh.
Just a point of clarification. At the moment, as it is, the application that is standing, still live, on which they can build, is for 8.2 meters height. And is the application here to vary that height to a...
No, the approved plan for plot 4, I believe, was 7.
No, plot 3.
Plot 3. For plot 3 was 7. It was lower. It was originally lower. It was 1.75 metres lower. It was 7 point something. The original one that they can build if they wanted to.
Thank you. Councillor Bergs.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm slightly concerned. This cross section that we're looking at here is obviously provided by the applicant. If we actually look at the top point where it says number 160 Eastgate on your plan, and take a ruler line across there to plot 3, I'm not entirely sure that's not slightly deceptive on the eye, because the one where we were. Sorry, the one where we were. I've just tried it here. It's presented as if it is plot 3, as if it is visually as if it is no higher than 160. If you actually look at it, but so in fact there's been a slight, I'd call it artistic interpretation here, that where it says 8.75, when you visually look at it and you put your ruler across where you've got the top of the 8.1, it appears to be about the same. So in fact, on the diagram, plot 3 is actually presenting as 8.1, not 8.75. if we're actually looking at the comparisons there. Can you see what mathematically? Yes.
But James Wellborn has raised his hand. If I just allow James to speak, and then Councillor
they look on the plan as if they're the same height.
Is that drawn correctly?
Yes, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Probably not.
James, would you? Sorry, Pam, can you please switch your mic off?
Sorry.
Just say, Chairman, we've had an adjournment, but we are 3 hours in total for the meeting. So, obviously, if you want to proceed, which I'm almost certainly do, you just need to agree an extension of time, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I thought we'd be all right because of the adjournment. Just looking at the time, where are we? We've got another. Can I? Yeah, I was going to say, can we propose that we continue to 5? We're happy to second. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. All hands in favour of extending the time frame, please. Thank you. That's the majority. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. Going back to the plan, and if you look at the photo, you're saying, you know, there's a bit of fooey going on, but if you look at the plot on the right, which is the one on the road, if you look at the photo, as we said, that seems to go downwards. So they've put it all on a level playing field, but actually they should have dropped that one down, and then everything would have looked better.
Sorry, Councillor Milne.
There seems to be quite a lot of confusion about these heights. If you put your ruler across this drawing, because it's small in size, the scale doesn't really show it very well, but there is a gradual increase in the height of those properties. So you get to, I'm losing the plot as to which plot's which now, but the first house that's currently being built, and then you move further away and you get to the one that we're discussing, and that's where this difference of 76.195 metres comes in. But the further away they are, the more they recede in their impact. So, yes, they are getting slightly higher as you go along, but it will almost be hidden behind the house that's being built. So I think we need to take that distance and context into account. We're getting very confused, I think, on trying to compare directly with the old farmhouse.
Just to explain what we're doing, because it doesn't help that the print's so tiny on the late paper that it's really hard to see, but I've just seen on the screen there is actually a very slight slope downwards. It's very subtle, but there is a slight drop. We're just going to try and get on the screen the plan that's been put forward on page 8 of the late paper, so that we can all see a bit more clearly, because it's tiny, you can't even read the numbers on this. Councillor Crawford and Councillor Fellows. Oh, I apologise. I have my head down. So you go first, Councillor Fellows.
Sorry, I will have to go after this item as well, but this really is in deference to Councillor Wood. You'll love this. I am going to propose acceptance of the officer's recommendation, because I actually think we're talking about such small margins. When I look at the photograph and I visualise the house that we're being proposed, I can see nothing whatsoever that would make me to think it's doing what, sadly, Councillor Doug suggests it might. I might have questions about why other changes were made to this development, but this is not the time or place. The houses have been built, but I see no perceptible difference that's worth the discussion. I propose we accept the recommendation.
Thank you for that. Before we move forward, a statement has come in that needs to be read out. So this is from, sorry, it's the parish council, from the parish council. So I believe we should listen to this first, and then I will bear in mind your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The statement reads, "This has been a long and somewhat complex application covering the Grade 2 listed farmhouse and the associated plots, with a number of applications over recent years. The original plan was for plot 3. The original plan for plot 3 was for a cottage style house, and the planning permission for plot 4 was granted on this basis. Since then, there have been 2 additional planning applications for plot 3, first of which was objected to by the Conservation Officer and the Parish Council due to the planned height of the roof, 9 metres, and very large glass window on the first floor. It was felt that a 9-metre roof would overshadow the Grade 2 thatched farmhouse, and it was overdevelopment of the site. This application was then amended and the roof height was reduced by 25 centimetres only, and the very large glass window on the first floor was removed from the plan. The Conservation Officer then felt these changes would be acceptable. The Parish Council was surprised by this, as a reduction of only 25 centimetres did not seem sufficient to reduce the impact of the roof height. Policy DNP 9 of the Deepings Neighbourhood Plan states that new development should safeguard the amenities of existing residential properties in the immediate area by way of the alignment and the layout of the new buildings. Plot 3 is in the corner of the site and very visible from the entry point from the road. The roof height of 8.75 metres will mean that when travelling along East Gate in either direction, it will be visible from the road, impacting on the much lower roof level of the Grade 2 listed building. The creation of second-storey accommodation within the roof space of Plot 3 means that what was originally approved, i.e. the cottage-style house in keeping with the farmhouse, is now a very large 5-bedroom, 3-storey house. The Parish Council feels this application for Plot 3 has the potential to impact the neighbours' amenities to Plot 4 to the south and Plot 2 to the northwest due to its height and size. The Parish Council wishes to continue to object to this current application for Plot 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Fellows, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my last proposal because of the information I've just been given, which also highlights the point I made about developments that had been changed prior to this one being submitted. So in the light of what the Parish Council have said and the information within it, at this point I'd like to withdraw my recommendation to accept, and obviously I think we probably need to debate a little longer.
Thank you for that. I know, Councillor Crawford, you've had your hand up, but you've also spoken a few times. I would just, what appears new information from that statement is the relationship also to the other house properties. Would our officers be able to illustrate that to us, please?
So in my report, I've talked about neighbours' amenities, and I have assessed the impact of this dwelling against the design of the 2 that have been approved, Plot 2 and Plot 4. Thank you. And so I've assessed those, any potential impacts that is in my report, so that I didn't consider that there would be any adverse impact on the neighbours' amenities of those future dwellings.
Thank you. Would you like to comment?
So I think the officers have probably got some zoomed-in versions of the site location plan, the cross-section, just to assist. But if you look at page, so I can't see out my glasses, 8 on the additional papers, you'll see the layout, and there you can see plots 4 and 2, so you can see the relationship, and as Miranda just said, she's already assessed that, and she's quite comfortable looking at those separation distances, that there won't be an impact on the amenities of those occupiers, future occupiers.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. I believe 75 metres or roughly was mentioned, that the distance. How many of us can tell 20 inches, and I work in old money, at 75 metres? I don't think we can, and I'm quite happy to propose this, and we accept it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trotter.
I'm happy to second it. I'm pleased that the big window has been taken out. The house that's been mentioned opposite is more imposing, I think. I'm guided by people who went on the site visits, so I'm happy to second this.
Thank you.
I'll second it. I've got my mic on there.
Councillor Bellamy.
Just to discuss the Parish Council's comments just a little bit more. If you look at plot 2 and the relationship between 3 and 2, plot 2, the gable end is facing towards plot 3. So I think the likely impact on plot 2 from plot 3 is more the impact on plot 3, to be honest, rather than the what's has plot 2 already been built, has it? I don't know. Yeah. So I think, like I said, the impact would be on the new plot rather than on the one that's already built. The other thing is, if you are coming along Eastgate, really, what's already there on plot 2 and that is actually shielding plot 3. So I'm not actually convinced that there is a massive impact, to be honest. And the other point is, if you're looking onto the site on the picture that we already had, again the gable end's facing towards the road. So with plot 4 already, when that's already built out, you're only going to be able to see the very peak of plot 3. I mean, I do get the argument about builders coming back and trying to sort of squeeze it a little bit more out of it, and how absolutely annoying it is. But don't think that the impact is that sort of drastic that we can refuse it. And well, anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you. I must admit, I've got a lot of sympathy with the way this has progressed. I think, in a way, if there had been a challenge, perhaps, to the new bills that were approved, that might have been helpful. Given actually, if anyone's got impact on the setting, it's probably those, but they weren't objected to. So we're kind of left, I think, in a very awkward position here, where because they've been approved, it is difficult to then look at that small margin, especially also giving a slope. So I have to admit, I would, somewhat reluctantly, but I can't see how I can refuse this. That's my personal view. So in view of that, I know that Councillor Fellows, you originally were are you still minded to approve? Or?
I withdrew that, but Councillor Crawford has proposed it, seconded by Councillor Trotter. I'm prepared to cover that.
So we've been doing this. Thank you. So Councillor Crawford, you have recommended approval, and seconder Councillor Trotter. Thank you. In that case, can I suggest we go to the vote? So all those in favour, please raise your hands. So that's 9, and those against? That's 3. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. So with that, this has been approved. Thank you. Harrison.
Can I just propose the next one, Chair?
I don't think we can whisk through it that quickly. I think we should listen to our officer's report. So the next item is the removal of the existing passenger lift at Stamford Arts Centre, S24 1191. And if I can hand over to Adam to speak on this, I'm sure he can do this swiftly.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So, yeah, as you say, it's application S241191 for removal of the passenger lift and replacement with a new lift in the same location at Stamford Arts Centre, which is a Grade 2 star listed building from 1766. The proposal is to remove the existing lift that's currently inoperable and replace with a new lift in the exact same location. The replacement of the lift would include the removal of the existing lift and radiator and the installation of a new control room, and just some photos there showing the existing situation. The proposals themselves don't result in any loss of historic fabric, so it's considered that there will be no harm to the significance of the listed building. So therefore the recommendation is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to grant consent for the proposed works subject to conditions set out within the main report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bishnal Singh.
Madam Chairman, I'm very, very pleased that this application has come forward. This lift has been out of operation for more than 3 years, yeah, and it's much needed lift for the to go into theatres, the cinema in there. And I will go as far as long to propose we accept this, the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Harrison.
I'll second the proposal, Chair.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. That application has been approved. Thank you. So that was the last application before us. We just have a couple of any other business items which shouldn't take long. First of all, Councillor Bishnal Singh, I understand you had something you wanted to raise.
We got in Stamford, the development on what's called Stamford North Streets, that's been going for a very long time. It looks like an abandoned site. I wonder if we can do anything. I have asked this question before about it. If the builder can't continue to build this hotel that we're supposed to build on the Stamford North Street, then it looks like an eyesore there. And something needs to be done because it's been going too long, constructed a little bit partially, and it's just left for a long time. And you've got the metal frames that have been put there, it's rusting in there. There's another one from the same builder, same applicant, is at that used to be the Salvation Army sites. They've got certain thing has been dug out and been left there in unfinished, nothing been done. I would like to know if anything being done, any enforcement action is being taken on those two sites, or what are things we as planning, I know a planning application was given for them and it hasn't been fulfilled.
Emma, are you able to respond to that or give a quick update? Sorry. Oh.
I'm also a town councillor. It's the same builder. It's the same builder. He keeps doing these things and he never finishes it. And it is really ruining our lovely town. So I fully support what Councillor Bishnal Singh's doing, and there must be something that can be done to make them either finish it or sell it or do something about it. And one of the boardings that's up keeps getting foul language and racial things put on it all the time. So it really is an absolute, utter eyesore. So please, can you look into it and let us know what can be done, or tell us now? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think both those sites we've looked at already before, and I've already provided responses. Apologies, it may not be to you, but certainly to other Stamford councillors. We've actually got not very great powers when it comes to forcing a completion of a site. We have looked at it in the past under section 215 of the Town and Country Planning Act, which is the untidy site notice. I can absolutely get the officers to go out again and see if it's deteriorated sufficiently. It's a case of looking at whether or not it's severely affecting the amenity of the area. If there is an antisocial behaviour element in terms of the graffiti and that, then that's something we can touch base with our environmental protection team to see if there's anything that they can do as well. What there is coming through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, although I think it's one of the areas that we still need secondary legislation for, is a way of penalising developers that have a poor track record of developing, but that's not with us yet, unfortunately. So we'll have a look at it. I've made a note, and we'll update you once the enforcement team looks at it again. But unfortunately, completion notices are really not an easy thing to deal with, I'm afraid, and not something it's not an easy thing to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you. Can we not go to the Ombudsman or something with the, to be able to push this forward or find out a way to do it? There's got to be something somewhere because, one of the areas that Harish is on about, it's been like that for over 30 years. Over 30 years, and he's not done anything with it. So there must be something, surely, somewhere. Well, thank you, Emma. I understand your hands are tied. I fully appreciate that, but it doesn't make Stamford look any nicer.
No, I completely understand that. The Ombudsman's obviously for local government and other public bodies and not for private individuals. I don't believe there is an equivalent. I mean, if it's an unsafe site, then obviously the Health and Safety Executive might be interested. It's a really difficult area. I'm not trying to be difficult in terms of not offering solutions. It's really, really difficult. So all I can suggest is that, I asked the team again to go out and have another look at the site. It is on their radar. They do keep monitoring it from time to time to see what condition it's in. The other option is...
The reason he stopped building the hotels because...
Also, if I can add on that, he also wanted the front access on the Broad Street, and now he's acquired those buildings there. But still, I would have thought he's acquired that nearly 2-3 years ago. So I just wondered, it is time that he could, now he's got his front access, why doesn't he complete that?
I think that's probably a question you need to ask the landowner why he's not completing it. As I say, we will go and have a look and see what we can make an assessment in terms of how tidy the site is. But in terms of direct questions about why the landowner is simply not progressing their planning permissions, that's a matter that you need to ask the landowner, I'm afraid.
But what I'd like to do, if I may, thank you, you've raised your points, and Emma's given a response, especially I think she can at this time. So if I suggest we move forward, Councillor Harrison, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just another similar one to that, Emma. I don't know whether you can help me. The development at the top of Darshot Road behind the Sportsman that went bankrupt, as far as I'm aware, 18 months ago. There's nothing been done on there. I've had a resident contact me from that development. There's landslip now happening at the bottom of her house. Where would we stand on going with that, being as the developers are no longer? The modular buildings have got no roofs on, so all the insides of those modular buildings are damaged. I would suggest they will probably all have to be demolished.
So for the person that might be suffering physical damage in terms of the land stability, unfortunately it's a civil matter. Right, okay. We are aware, I believe, of that site as well. I know the enforcement team did look at it, I think, early on and have a look. So again, I'll get them to have a look in terms of public amenity. But in terms of that relationship, that unfortunately is a private matter. I don't know the current owners. Do you know anything, Phil, that you might know a bit further?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can add to that. I think my understanding is it was the house builder that were contracted to build the properties went bust, and effectively the developer has remained the same, and I think they've got a new house builder to complete the contract as we've been
not the money that is being touted about to do it, because it looks like those buildings without the roofs have all been so damaged. They were modular buildings. You imagine 18 months of rain and weather getting in through those, and with it being modular, all the plasters, I mean the walls are black, mouldy black, and we've seen that with cameras. You can zoom in and see. So I would think the whole lot would have to be demolished, or at least 7 blocks of those houses would have to be demolished. So there's more there than, I don't know whether we need to have a look at that something or whatever. I don't know. Do we have no say over it whatsoever?
I think only if it's from a public amenity point of view that it's an untidy site, then obviously we can step in, we have powers to step in. In terms of future house builder taking the site on and what they would and would not need to do, and whether anything is salvageable, that's probably more related to them, their insurers, and from a house builder perspective, and whoever's doing the building control on it, I guess, as well, because they'd need to satisfy that either the improved inspector or the council that they're still salvageable, basically, they're structurally sound, etc., and they meet the building regs. So I think there are sort of controls in that sort of sense in terms of the future of the site and making sure the buildings are safe. But I think all we can do at the moment is look at it from an untidy site. But I've made a note. I'll get the team out. We can update you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add, I know why Councillor Dilks is here. I know that when the firm first went bankrupt, a number of members of the public suggested SK took it over and considered purchasing the site. But is that something that has been looked at? That might, it just, I know it was a lot healthier then. They'd just gone bankrupt rather than being several years so down the line. But I'm just saying that's what members of the public were asking, so I just thought I'd mention it. And I think, sorry, I'll do Gloria next very quickly.
One of the sites in Stamford is knocked the building down, so he won't pay any rates on that land, will he? Or will he have to pay rates on the land, that building on it? And the other one, I think, am I right, Harris? The roof's still on the other building, isn't it? The hotel job.
There's no roof, it's just...
Yeah, so if there's no roof on it, they don't pay rates or anything, do they? Oh, thank you.
I don't know, I'm afraid. It's not something I'm aware of.
So all I can say is from talking to a developer, I was advised by the developer that if it's uninhabitable, it's a way of avoiding rate, unfortunately, which is not great at all. But that's how the system currently works. If I can move forward very quickly to the agenda item that I had, it was just, you all very kindly filled in requests for printing. Just to let you know, they haven't been forgotten, but over the summer people were away, etc., so it's difficult to do it. But James, bless his cotton socks, has very kindly has agreed to put it forward, so we should have them for our next meeting. So that would be printed copies of the MPPF, not only and only the policy parts of the local plan. There's absolutely no point printing the whole thing off. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one... just a quick addition, Madam Chairman. I think this is, as KDC been dealing with, is Haddon Road. Some of the residents about 2 weeks ago asked me about what is happening with Regatta. I know we have got the judgment that needs to be enforced, but it's still the same. A long time ago we got that, but the site is still the same.
The enforcement team are aware, they are dealing with it. I believe it's with our legal team in terms of next steps, because they failed to comply with the requirements of the enforcement notice I think we had to serve in the end on that one. So I'll chase it up and I'll have to give you an update.
Thank you. I'd like to now call the meeting to a close. Thank you all very much. Thank you.